Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our IBM Developer Twitch stream today. We've got some great content around Call for Code, our yearly competition to address humanitarian issues. So I'll be doing a half-hour introduction to Call for Code, some of the rules, some tips, and some sharing some resources with you. And after this, we've got John Wallachy and his team of folks who created some starter kits. They'll take you through that technology, some info on bots, and some of the Ibm Cloud services that might be of interest. So you can carve out an application to submit the Call for Code competition. So I'm Daniel Crook. I am the CTO of Call for Code, which is a 5-year program with a yearly competition. We're in our 3rd year of it right now. And also the IBM Code and Response program that we have in partnership with the Linux Foundation. So what sets Call for Code as a competition apart from other Tech for Good initiatives is that we take the ideas that come out of the competition and we provide them the support to deploy them around the world where they're needed, and also to support them as sustainable open source projects. So I'll get into some of that stuff so you can see previous winners, get inspired by those stories, get a feel for what sort of applications we're looking for. Okay, and there's a couple websites too I'll share with you. The important one is developer.ibm.com/call for code. That's got the technology, it's got some of the schedule listed there. There's also a callforcode.org site. So that's going to have information. And generally, that's got the canonical rules about the competition, the judging schedule as well. And if you're interested in actually taking part in Call for Code as an organization, sponsoring or supporting, there's ways to find information there too as well. So Call for Code's the yearly competition. It's a thing that we've done in partnership with the Linux Foundation, David Clark Cause, and other partners. And then Code and Response is the incubator, as it were, for the ideas. So Call for Code's always taken on the large humanitarian challenges that the world faces and provided a way to match technology against those large issues. So this year, we've got 2 tracks in it. One of which is creating applications, tactical applications that can address some of the impacts of the current pandemic with COVID-19. It's not about doing scientific research or vaccine development or folding proteins. This is around addressing all the other impacts on society that come from the pandemic. And when we launched Call for Code, the yearly competition this year in February, we originally had focused on climate change as the big issue that we wanted folks to address. So in Call for Code this year, we do have 2 tracks. We've got the COVID-19 track as well as the climate change track. And in both cases, we're looking for applications submitted to address those large issues, carve out a piece of a scope that can be solved with technology, and ones that we can support and bring to the world and help deploy. One of the, when you look at a large issue like climate change or COVID-19, it can be very difficult to see how to translate that large issue into something that you can actually go solve and make a daily, an incremental change on, something you can do today to make a difference. So within the climate change track, we have 3 sub themes, one of which is water sustainability, one of which is energy sustainability, and the other disaster resiliency. And this, if you've been familiar with Call for Code in previous years, we focused on natural disasters. So that's still a key issue. It's still pretty pressing, and it is definitely tied to climate change. So we're looking at those 3 issues. And on the COVID-19 track, again, we're not focused on creating vaccines, doing deep scientific research. There's other efforts from IBM and our partners that do take on those issues. Those are important. We definitely encourage folks to look at those and take advantage of understanding some of those resources that might be available there. But in the case of Call for Code, the large part of COVID-19 that we've carved out are 3 issues. One around crisis communications. How do you deal with automating communications when you don't have necessarily workers with you, or you've got too much demand or too little demand? How do you automate that stuff to be more efficient, connecting with local authorities, connecting with businesses, connecting with other organizations? The second sub-theme is remote education. So just like the rest of the world, I'm here with my son. He's downstairs learning. As you can hear, my dog is also here. So how do we actually provide a way of continuing education for students when they're disconnected? There's tools out there. There's software as a service you can use, but there's also custom types of things that you can create, such as quizzes, offline learning tools, things like that. And finally, community cooperation. So, how do you connect with your neighbors when you're all in isolation, when you're together but socially distant? So, we've got some technology there as well. But that's the three sub themes for Call for Code and the COVID-19 track. And um, what we really want to do is make sure that you're creating applications, at least right now, for the COVID-19 track. The competition itself runs from um, the we announced it on February 26th. We opened it for submissions on March 30th, and we will be judging the applications through after submission in July. But we do want to see some applications created up front, and I'll get to that in a bit. But why would you even take part in this competition? Why would you spend your time doing this? There's obviously a cash prize. There's a $200,000 cash prize. There's support from the Linux Foundation to provide the best practices for creating online communities around your solution. There's an IBM Service Core team that's going to complement your submission if it wins, and help bring it to life. We've also, on the climate change side, which is less of a focus right now, we're closely aligned with the United Nations. They're going through their 75th anniversary this year, and we have 10 years left before the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So there's just a lot of potential areas to take part in this competition, a lot of resources out there to learn from, and hopefully you'll find some of them through this series today and later this week as well. So for the COVID-19 track, as you can see, it lays on top of the existing call for code schedule. We opened it for submissions to COVID-19 on March 20th. And we are going to look at all the submissions that come in before April 27th to give them an accelerated timeline for judging and raise awareness of the really promising solutions there at our online IBM Think conference. It's our biggest conference as IBM. So raising awareness of those solutions, getting people involved and mobilized behind them. And then we'll work with the teams to deploy those virtual tools in each of those three sub themes around the world. If you miss that deadline, we still want to see you create those applications. We'll look at the things as they come in. Obviously, whatever's going to make a difference in the world, we want to support. That's a key differentiator here, right? It's not just tech for good and then you go home. It's taking these promising ideas and getting people rallying around them. So you can still submit for the COVID-19 track, climate change through the end of July. We'll continue to judge those. They may be more general purpose, maybe more pandemic related at that point, but you still have a couple of options there. We really want to see the great ideas come in. So right after this talk, we'll have John Wallachy and some folks from his team talk about the technologies for crisis communication. We had a bunch of teams come together to create starter kits, and his team created the one around crisis communication. Actually, all three of the sub themes do have a starter kit, and the key point of the starter kit is that we know there's a big challenge out there. How do we digest that into a particular piece that you can work with? So we do that with the starter kits. They show you one potential use case within that sub theme. They give you a description of the use case, a potential architecture for the solution, and then some working code to actually get started. So you can kind of learn the IBM Cloud if you're not familiar with it, learn how to use artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, all those services. So we've got a starter kit for crisis communication. It focuses on chatbots and SMS UIs. So how do you share information? How do you automate responses to frequently asked questions, things like that? One of the examples I give is, if you're a local shop owner, you have a bunch of people calling, seeing if there's early opening hours for senior citizens, but you don't have people managing the phones because they're working in the shop. So how do you automate some of that and get people in? Could also be local authorities use that information to share information proactively notify people, things like that. For remote education, there's how you can stand up an open source edX platform, how you can set up a syllabus, some quizzes in there as well. How do you keep students engaged? As what I've learned here with my 8-year-old and homeschooling is there's a lot of tools the school uses. They're new to using those tools. Sometimes they're not as effective as something I would maybe want to teach him about how to use STEM technologies to learn to program. So I would want to create my own system, base it on an existing syllabus, or just help them use different tools, keep them engaged so it's not repetitive with the same tools as well. So potentially carving out a specific, really fun way to learn, something that you can do with the starter kit there. And finally, around community cooperation, there's a starter kit for helping you learn how to use weather company data. The weather company, weather.com, is part of IBM. So we've got some APIs there that folks can use around, uh, weather in general, but also some COVID information that's aggregated into an API. Supply chain data, so how you might use a blockchain or some other way for folks to share information in a peer-to-peer way. So starter kits in all three areas, as well as the ones for climate change. So with those same three areas, and I'll show you where you can find all these. We've got tools for understanding energy sustainability, water sustainability, and disaster resiliency. So in the case of energy and water, how do you measure your usage? How do you make better decisions around how you use those materials? You'll find sample applications there, some data science tool for predicting demand, things like that. And disaster resiliency is probably one of our more heavily weighed set of technologies that we have, given that we focused on it in previous years. So we've got lots of great example applications you can build on. You can look at Project Owl's technology from the first year that we ran Call for Code, Prometeo, who won this year's competition or 2019 competition. We've got their information there as well. And those sub themes within the two tracks, they're really suggested areas where you can carve out and make a difference. But you're free to use anything to build your applications as long as it rolls up into those top level themes. So beyond the starter kits, those are a starting point, but you can just create stuff from scratch. We've highlighted a couple of different types of services from the IBM Cloud that you might want to explore. So artificial intelligence is one pillar. You can learn about how to use Watson, the Watson tools. You can learn about machine learning pipelines in there with open source and IBM tools. Data science for doing analytics using Jupyter notebooks, predicting demand, optimizing resource usage. Internet of Things, that's always popular for Call for Code. Actually, the last 2 years winners did that because it was a great way to address basically the impacts of natural disasters by being in the environment with technology and sharing that up to the cloud. And then the fourth pillar is really about how you create the foundation for your application. So whether you're familiar with Node.js runtime and you want to use platform as a service to do that, just push your code. And if you just want to write functions, cloud functions, serverless functions, we've got a platform for doing that, responding to events, analyzing stuff as it comes in a really efficient way. There's also access to virtual machines, even the mainframe platforms. So there's a bunch of things on all ends of the spectrum that you might be interested in leveraging. You can do that. And sure. Okay, so it sounds like we got a question from the chat. I just got alerted. So preferred programming languages, and I'm sorry, Mia, what was the other part of that question? You can't hear me. How do you choose your data source? So good question. It's really up to you. The point of these resources is that you have a lot of choice. So you've got a full breadth of things, but also with the starter kits and some of these highlighted services, you've got kind of deep areas you can explore. In the case of previous winners, just looking at their solutions, since they were both IoT based, they used firmware written in C, actually for the Arduino platforms, ESP32 boards. So if you're familiar with that, that connects up to MQTT. It's a simple lightweight message framework. And those messages are processed in a database, a Postgres database. For one of them, I think Cloud for the other, no SQL database. And they're processed, some of them through Cloud Functions, some through Ruby on Rails. And in the case of Prometeo, they actually stood up a Kubernetes cluster with an Nginx server on there to serve the website and handle some of the WebSocket work they've been doing. And then those connect and turn out to other services, external APIs, weather company data. So there's a lot of options. It really depends on the application you want to go after. So point is, there's a lot of services there. And definitely when you join us in Slack, we got a bunch of mentors in different technologies that you can reach out to. And I'll get to that in a bit. But it's all custom to what you want to build. Okay. So again, what really sets this apart from other competitions is that we want these ideas to live on as sustainable applications, right? So when you create these things, it's really important to think forward. How am I going to build a community around this solution? Obviously you want to win the competition, but just keeping in mind, what's my plan for deploying this? What would I like to see come from it after the competition? So when you submit your application, you'll be asked not only for the code and a demo, but also a roadmap for how you want it supported. And the way we support the applications is through Code and Response. It's a program we have in partnership with the Linux Foundation, and it's about deploying those solutions. It's about providing an incubator for the ideas. So as they come in, we iterate through a bunch of phases with them to build them out, to provide consulting on how to make them more secure, how to make them more scalable, how to engage the community around them. We do field tests with the winner, as we did in Puerto Rico with Project Owl, as we did in the Barcelona area with Prometeo. And then how do we form connections with end users of that system? So it's all about getting ideas from Call for Code, incubating them, and giving them a future. And so we've got a whole framework for that. It's not necessarily a topic of this call, but just keep in mind that that is the end goal. What we want from Call for Code is sustainable open source ideas that have a future that we can put real effort behind to deploy against a real problem. There's a few projects out there already in our pipeline from last year, as well as things that were just interesting to Code and Response that maybe weren't eligible for Call for Code. So if you created something before the competition, it may not be eligible for Call for Code, but it's still of interest. We'd love to hear about it. And I talked a lot about Project Owl and about Prometeo, so let's just give you a little insight into those previous competitions. So the first year of Call for Code, we had 156 nations participate, over 100,000 developers, and a bunch of celebrity supporters really sharing the idea. Maybe if you saw the news yesterday, we got Lady Gaga to help support Call for Code this year. So we've had folks come in from around the world, share the idea, raise awareness of it, not only to the technologists in their life, but people who are interested in learning about coding, learning about open source technology, and contributing their idea. So first year's project, Project Owl, they created a mesh network that provides a quick and cheap way to set up 1% connectivity in an area that has 0% connectivity. So they created it based on Watson IoT, a Ruby on Rails dashboard on the IBM Cloud, written for Cloud Foundry, and they integrated that with weather company APIs. And as the winning team, we worked with them to deploy and test their solution in Puerto Rico. It was inspired by the lack of connectivity in Puerto Rico, some places up to 9 months that didn't have internet connectivity. Interestingly enough, power is fairly easy to restore after many disasters. There's ways to do it with solar, generators, things like that. But connectivity is always one of those things that it's hard. It's a lagging thing to get back up, whether it's cell phone connectivity, internet, anything. So what they created was simple, cheap little devices. We tested them throughout the island in dense urban areas, in mountainous environments with lots of valleys, along the shore where humidity is an issue, with radio distance, and within deeply packed concrete conurbations, right? So testing it in all sorts of areas, starting with battery powered devices. And then we continued to test it with local partners down there. We connected them with the University of Puerto Rico system, Johnson & Johnson, local government, island government, Commonwealth government, as well as a co-working area named Engine 4, where they have a ton of hardware, a lot of great folks that are really engaged in the IoT community, and some disaster related NGOs like ITDRC. So we connected the OWL team with those partners and tested the technology. And in our fourth deployment with them last year in Puerto Rico, we set up a permanent installation at the University of Puerto Rico Mayagüez campus on the western part of the island. There's a couple of nodes in other parts of the island. I think they have about 30 ducks quacking there, emitting signs of life that they're available for connectivity. And they moved beyond a battery-powered system to solar power. So you've got the opportunity to deploy these quickly and cheaply as disposable devices in advance afterwards, but also pre-install them and get power, connect them to satellite, so they're completely independent. So they've been iterating on that solution from these boxes to these 3D printed encasings, and so they're working on getting actually some pre-printed boards as well. So actually their deployment right now, actually they've expanded their open source community to include the students there. They've launched a Linux Foundation project for their firmware. They've got up to, I think, 10 contributors right now. So you can check out that technology. The students are learning, they're contributing. It's really a great story what they created. And last year, the competition expanded out, and we had the winning team was actually not comprised of developers or programmers per se. Of the 5 folks on the team, one was a firefighter, one was an EMT or a nurse, one was a project manager, one was a data scientist, and one was a full stack developer. So coming together, this team of not necessarily technologists were able to create a solution that was important, that made sense for the context, and did really well because they're able to immediately test it and get feedback from the firefighters that they defined the solution for. And what that solution actually is it's an IoT device strapped to a firefighter's uniform, measures chemical exposure, so you can get readings in real time, carbon monoxide, temperature, humidity, smoke concentration. It pushes that to a dashboard. You can see in this picture, we had a field station where we did a field test with it. So 10 firefighters wearing these devices. You can see who's been exposed to too much toxins, how they can be pulled away from that danger. But also, what they created is a way to manage that over time. So understanding the long-term effects of being exposed to those chemicals. So we're working with them now. We've done a field test with them in February. We've assembled a corporate service core team of 8 folks to help them advance this solution, improve the data science, improve the solution, turn it into an offline model. We connected it with Project Owl technology. So in addition to using a Wi-Fi hotspot, you can use LoRa, which extends the range, a little more reliable in certain areas. So keep an eye on this project. It's going to be supported through this year while the Call for Code competition is going on. And you can learn a lot more about the solution. It is also under development in the GitHub repository for code and response. And just this field test, this wasn't actually during a real out of control wildfire. What they do is a lot of control burns. So a way to actually test it in a controlled environment with 10 volunteer firefighters. They intentionally set the fire and then they put it out, but you're still exposed to the same chemicals you would be in a real wildfire. So got some great input from the input from that test that's iterating into the solution. So again, great solution, and it continues to be developed, and that's what we want from any Call for Code submitted project. So there's a couple of websites to go check out. So developer.ibm.com/call-for-code is the main one for technology resources. And that shows you how you can actually register for the competition, how you can find resources to take part in the competition, how you can join the Slack community to find teammates and engage mentors, and then how you can actually submit your application when it's ready. Callforcode.org is more of a general purpose site. It does have the official rules. It has the judging criteria. It has a submission form. It also has the frequently asked questions and a link if you're just interested in providing your expertise to participants or sponsoring the competition. You can find that on the callforcode.org site. Okay, let me just click over to the website here. So again, if you're interested in taking part in the COVID competition, You'll find information here. First, you accept the challenge, you register for the IBM Cloud. You'll get updates on the competition as it progresses. You can find starter kits for COVID-19 here, take on climate change, those starter kits as well, and then just a whole bunch of other resources. And here's your 4 steps. Accept the challenge, start building, join the Slack community, and then submit your idea. And even if you're not ready to submit, at least looking at that form will help you understand the types of things that you need and the maturity level of really what we're looking for. Um, Again, brand new code built for the Call for Code competition period. You select the track that you want to submit it for, give it a description, provide that roadmap, which is what you ultimately want to see in a deployed application. Um, Provide a link to the code, the working code for your solution. It can't just be an idea. Those are great, but those aren't going to be eligible. 3-minute demo video. You can keep additional material in the GitHub repo, additional videos that are longer form, and then mention the IBM Cloud services or Red Hat services that you used. You have to use at least one. Well, that's why we made all the technology available to you on the developer site. And accept the participation agreement. This is very important. It shows all the eligibility criteria. It shows you the code of conduct you must accept to participate, the time frame, and prize details. And again, if you're just an organization that wants to take part, you can find a prospectus here. You can find a way to contact. There's some social materials you can use to engage, and there's also links back, of course, to the competition and submission details. So with that, I'm going to check the questions in the chat and see if we have any. Okay, so we got a question here about whether data sets are available to be used. So if you go to the FAQ portion, and these are linked also from the developer site. Actually, this is one of our most frequently asked questions, so we've addressed it here. So there is, do I have access to any data sets? So there's a bunch of resources that do come from the United Nations, from the Red Cross, but our colleague Susan Malika, she's available in Slack as well. She created a blog post on useful data sets for Call for Code. So these were originally created for climate change, but they are also generally general available. There's a methodology here for finding good data where you can locate things. The starter kits themselves have links as well. So if you look at the one for social applications that John will get to in a minute, there is a link to COVID-19 APIs you can look at as well. So just a lot of resources here. And if you have trouble finding any, just engage us in Slack. Good question coming in. So Slack, is it the best place to find team members? Yes, that's the most common location for participants. I know it can be a little awkward, and sharing what your project idea is kind of early, but it's the best way to find them. And actually, Project Owl, they were entirely virtual, didn't meet each other until the award ceremony in 2018. They used Slack to find each other. The folks from Prometeo, they actually kind of knew each other in advance. They took part in the 2018 competition. So they had the advantage of kind of knowing people they wanted to work with already. But that is generally the best place. So we've got a channel there specifically. It's called Team Building. And then we've got channels for each of the sub themes and the 2 tracks. So if you have, if you're looking at particular skills, look in team building and engage there. It's probably the best place to do it. Okay, look at that. So we're at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to hand over to John. He'll be joining shortly. If you have any other questions, you can connect with me. My name is Daniel Crook. Find me in Slack. Anybody that's got is an IBMer has an IBM mentor name, so you can search for IBM mentors in Slack as well. But that's the best place to start. And then if you can't find what you're finding, find what you need there. We'll connect you to other areas as well. All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here today. Great to talk to developers about Call for Code 2020, and particularly the starter kits. In our case, we're going to talk today about crisis communications. But before I go there, I wanted to introduce the team of experts that put together the starter kit. And we're going to spend the next hour or two talking through the implementation of the tutorials. I think you'll find it interesting and useful not only to read through the tutorials and take our code and fork our code and build something amazing with it, but hear from us, hear from the experts, and actually watch us do it, because our goal is to start from finish, take you all the way through the steps as we documented in the various tutorials. So really quick, wanted to introduce myself. So my name is John Wallachy. I'm a IBM developer advocate, and I love to mentor at hackathons and teach workshops. I love to inspire developers to build with IBM Cloud. We have also online, we've got Pooja. Pooja can wave. And so Pooja is one of our IBM City developer advocates, and she's going to run through some of the tutorials in about 15 minutes or so. Next up, we've got Mofi Rahman. He's part of the IBM developer advocacy team, part of New York City, but then just most recently moved over to do some of the code tutorials around our container services. Up in a couple of minutes, we will have Upkar Litter. He's going to join us. He's actually teaching another webinar on the West Coast, so he'll join us pretty soon. You can follow all of us on Twitter, so feel free to like and subscribe. And so you can find us there. But actually, if you want to talk about Call for Code, I really encourage you to join the fight and engage with us in Slack, because we do have a crisis communication channel in our Slack community, our Slack workspace. And in that channel, you can reach out to me or tag Pooja or tag Mofi or Upkar, and we'd be happy to answer your questions in the Slack channel. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about starter kits. And before I dive into the crisis communication starter kit, I wanted to introduce what a starter kit is, so that we could all ground ourselves on why we think this is a useful set of technologies to solve one of the problems in Call for Code, the COVID-19 challenge. So a starter kit is a really great way to get yourself up and going pretty quickly. You might come with an idea, and that's great. Just run with it. Some developers want some inspiration. They want some a running start, and that's what we're here to do with you. So we've put together, we talked with a bunch of experts. We talked to people that are first responders, and we put together a use case. We described what the problem was, and then we came together with a solution. And so we'll describe that to you. And then we drew some architecture diagrams on how the technologies come together to solve this particular starter kit idea. We take you through a tutorial, how we write all the steps, right? And it's step-by-step instructions on what to do, how to build it, how to use IBM Cloud, and actually make this starter kit come to life. We describe to you the data sets that we used, and then there's tons of documentation that we make available in a starter kit that really can make you be successful. So hopefully you're going to learn about crisis communications today on but I'll also plug 2 days from now we're going to be back again to talk about the other two starter kits in the COVID-19 challenge. We'll be back for remote learning and remote education, and then also with the community cooperation starter kit. So pencil that in on your calendar as well. So let's jump over now. Remember, when we wrote our tutorials, we did all of our work in the open, and you can find the source code for our examples in GitHub. If you go to github.com/call-for-code, and in our particular case, you can jump down to the Solution Starter Kit Communication 2020. Do jump in here, fork our code, like and subscribe to it, watch it so that you can be notified of updates, and then of course engage with us, make it better for yourself, and incorporate it into your project. So all the source codes is here ready for you to take. Let's go jump to developer.ibm.com, where we've got a call for code landing page. And on the landing page, you can just learn about the challenge. Daniel Crook just took you through all the background for call for code and how to join, sign the participation agreement, form a team. And in particular, he talked about the COVID-19 global challenge, all of us working from home, sheltering in place, and are really, we're all living through this. So I think there's great opportunity as developers to use our skills, build something amazing to help our neighbors, help the first responders, the medical professionals, help those that are infected, and those that are recovering. So do join the challenge, join the fight. We really need you as a developer to bring your skills to the challenge. And and if you saw the timeline, we want to pick the top 3 in April. So April 27th, submit your first projects, and then we'll hopefully announce those, I think, early in May. Of course, you have time if you want to submit your project after then to enter the normal challenge, runs all the way through July 31st. And of course, there's a $200,000 prize at the end of that, takes you through October. All right, let's go take a look at our starter kit. So I'll follow the link to starter kits and scroll down here. So we've got the first one that we're going to talk about is crisis communication. And so I've got the team to talk about that. Let's go show you that particular page. Now, how did we lay out the starter kit? Remember, it was a problem statement. We want to deliver trusted information to our communities, to users. And instead of fake news, we decided we wanted to deliver trusted sources. So we used the CDC FAQ. In the United States, one of the government agencies is the Center for Disease Control, and the CDC published a set of FAQs, which we turned into a set of chatbot Q&A services, and we built that into our chatbot. We'll hear about all of those intents and entities and dialogue from Pooja in just a couple of minutes. So we took advantage of a set of technologies in IBM Cloud. We looked at Watson Assistant and speech to text and text to speech, webhooks, cloud functions, Watson Dialogue, Watson Discovery. And you're going to be wiring those together with us in the next 2 hours to really make this come to life. Of course, so we've got some more description of what the idea is and how we might build a solution. We want to expose this information on a variety of techniques. So it's one thing to build a chatbot, but how do we bring that chatbot into experiences that a user would find useful? And so we've got a number of architecture diagrams. The first one takes our chatbot, embeds it on a web page. And so you might have your solution. It will we'll show you how to place it on a website and run Node.js. We also know that many people want to engage a chatbot in Slack. And so we can show you how to incorporate the chatbot into a Slack workspace. And then we're going to come back and we'll talk about how to voice enable a chatbot using Node-RED. So each of the architecture diagrams, I'm going to open this one up because I think it's useful to really narrate here. We start with a user, and they're looking for information about COVID-19, and they come to a website. it's running Node.js, happens to be running an IBM Cloud, and behind that chatbot, maybe on their web page, is a little in the corner, a chat service that says "Talk to me," and it's going to interface with Watson Assistant. We use the trusted data sources from the CDC and their research and expertise. Those became part of our Watson Assistant core corpus. But we also know that people want live information. How many people are infected? How many people are infected in my country? How many people are infected in my county? And so we take advantage of IBM Cloud Functions, and Mofi will take us through this particular section of our tutorials on how to call out to an external data source. It will go query information from Johns Hopkins and then provide answers back to the user, how many people are infected with the disease. We also tied out to Watson Discovery because often you want to ask the question, the news. I want to know recent news about COVID-19 in my community. And so we take advantage of Watson Discovery, which is a news service that can go and use natural language understanding to select articles based on COVID-19 and whatever you're interested in. So that's the common architecture that we're showing here. What we'll do, and then of course we annotate the steps, so we tell you how it all works. Then we take that same architecture and we put the Slack interface, the Slack user experience in front of that. Instead of a web page, we've got Slack. And Pooja will take you through the Slack integration steps. And towards the end, we'll come back here and I'll take you through how to embed that Slack interface, that Watson Assistant chatbot in a Node-RED flow with Watson speech to text and text to speech so that you can voice enable and talk to it. All right, so here we go. We've got a number of tutorials. So the first tutorial is how to set it up with an instance of Watson Assistant, how to connect it to all of the data sources that I mentioned. So Pooja and Mofi will take us through that. And then we'll bring in Upkar when he's finished with his webinar. He'll introduce us to how to embed the chatbot into a simple web page and show you how to deploy that to IBM Cloud. He'll run it first on his laptop and then deploy to the cloud. We'll come back. Pooja will take us through integrating with Slack, and then I'll wrap up with how to deploy to Node-RED. All right, so those are the tutorials. Now, what I'll do, and I know that Pooja is going to take us there, but I'll click in. And so all of the tutorials available in developer.ibm.com, step-by-step instructions with the architecture diagrams, all the prerequisites that you might need, and then step-by-step. Click, with screenshots. I think you're going to find it pretty insightful. And so let's hear from the experts, because Pooja and of course, now it wasn't just Pooja and Mofi on this particular tutorial. We've got experts that are in IBM. We tapped Matt Price and Dada Byron. Huge shout out to them for their contributions here as well. All right, so I'm going to stop. Pooja's going to take over my screen, and let's hear it from her.
Thank you so much, John. Let me start sharing my screen. Just a second. Okay, let's see. Continue. Okay, just share. Awesome. So thank you so much, John. It was really amazing working on this project with everyone. When we were working on this, I think we learned so much about like the power of using a service like Watson Assistant to actually give information to people. And I think while building this, one thing I learned is that this tool is really powerful. There's a lot of use cases, and I think overall, this is one example of using a tool like this, but especially in this type of situation when people are constantly trying to seek the right information and make sure that there's like not fake news spreading, having something like this could be an interesting use case as well. So, I wanted to kind of walk you all through basically how to kind of build something like this. So, if you guys go, I know that John just showed us the Call for Code starter kit. Within the starter kit, so I guess let me just go for that. So Call for Code. So if you just Google Call for Code, you can go to use our starter kits, and then when you view our starter kits, the crisis communication starter kit is the one that we've been working on. So you can actually, when you click on one of the tutorials, there should be something in here called Get the Code, and that will actually take you to our GitHub. So this is where we've like documented pretty much everything, and you can actually really follow along. So the part that I really wanted to talk about is actually setting up a Watson Assistant, so especially on IBM Cloud. So IBM Cloud is a really great place where you can find some really useful services to build projects. I think there might, when you go through this, you'll probably see a link to set up IBM Cloud. So once you actually create an account, we have the, in here we have all the architectural diagrams, but once you create a account, you should be able to get started by building your Watson Assistant. So the first step for you guys to do is just register for an IBM Cloud account. And this will let you, once you register, it'll let you have a lot of accesses to a lot of light services. So let me go and show you what some light services look like. So I've already created an IBM Cloud account. So when you can find all the services in the catalog page. So if you actually just click on the light, these are all the services that you can actually kind of like create right now and play around with for free. And so especially in this project, we used Watson Assistant. So the best way to create a Watson Assistant service is just by searching Watson Assistant. And when you create a Watson Assistant service, you'll get to this page where you can actually click on the service, and there's a couple of different options. So today I'm going to really talk to you guys a little bit about Lite account, and I'm also going to give you guys some insight on a Plus trial. So a Plus trial is also really interesting. I'll show you a really cool feature, especially when if you get it for Plus. It's free for 30 days. So, definitely create a Lite account, but also try out a Plus trial. And I'll show you the differences between both and the different things that you can integrate. So I have created a Lite account already. So I'm going to actually walk you guys through basically creating the entire Watson Assistant service, as well as integrating with the skill that our team created. So also feel free to follow along using our GitHub tutorial. We've outlined basically all of the steps here. So if you get lost, everything is documented as well. So So let me go and actually create. So I already created a Watson Assistant service. Let me show you what it looks like to create a Watson Assistant. So I'm going back to my dashboard, and your dashboard is where basically all of your services live. So once you create the light services, it'll show up on your dashboard. So I go to my Cloud Foundry services, and if I click under my services, it looks like I've created a ton of services. So I've played around with IBM Cloud a lot. So this is the assistant that I had created a while back ago. And this is where we're going to start creating our COVID crisis bot. So once you create it, you'll probably see a page like this. So, this is a great page because it has like your API keys, and it also lets you like launch your Watson Assistant. So when you launch your Watson Assistant, it goes to a different landing page. And so this is where basically it lives. So just a little bit of background on just like what Watson Assistant is. So it's actually a really great tool that allows people to build dialogues and chatbots essentially, and it uses natural language understanding to kind of build a very conversational product. So here I've actually played around with Assistant a lot, created different ones, like I created a phone advisor one, and you do things for customer care. This is a travel app that I'm playing with, but I wanted to actually walk you through what it would look like to create a COVID crisis bot from scratch. So before I create my assistant, I just want to point out a little bit where the skill lives. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create this assistant. So you're going to want it something. So I'm going to call this COVID crisis. Communicates bot. You can name it anything. I like to check this enable preview link because this is a really great service within Assistant that lets you actually preview your bot once you've made it. So let's click create assistant. So once you create your assistant, there's a couple of things here. So basically, the skill is going to be like the code where you set up these things called intents, entities, and or dialogue. And we'll dive a little bit deeper on exactly what those things are. But basically, this is a great way to basically build your assistant. You can actually create your skill from scratch, or you can actually use a couple of sample skills. So, or in our case today, what we're going to do is we're going to actually import a skill. But if you decide to create it from scratch, you can name it and create your skill. If you use a sample skill, Watson Assistant as a product itself comes with a couple of sample templates for different applications. But in our case, we're going to actually import a skill. So the first thing I did was I actually cloned this repo, and we have our starter kit skill in the assistant folder. So basically what this looks like is it's a raw JSON file, and it has like basically like our intents, entities, different things that we've actually used to build this Watson Assistant. So I'll talk a little bit about what exactly these things are, but in this case, the first thing you might want to do is you might want to clone this guy, and we'll have to import the skill. So I actually have it imported right here as well. So I have my skills, sorry, let me just imported I just put it in my desktop folder. So I'm going to just import from this folder. So let's just choose a JSON file. So I'm going to make sure that I have that. So starter kit. Assistant and my skill CDC COVID FAQs. So I'm going to open this. And then once you import it, you'll see this import button. And let's wait for it to import. Okay, awesome. So this is really great. So we can import the skill, and now once we click inside of it, we see a lot of different things. So on the side, you'll see that there's these intents, entities, dialogue, there's options, analytics. So let me walk you through a little bit about exactly like what everything here is. So the way that I like to think about everything with a conversational bot, there's a couple of different things that you might need. So within our conversational bot, we wanted to kind of capture, especially around this issue, like what are certain questions that people would ask, like what are certain questions that users might ask. And so those basically questions that a user might ask, those things are actually defined as an intent. So here we've actually scraped a CDC website, I believe, to get some of these common questions, especially in the COVID crisis case, about things that certain users might ask. So for example, one of our intents, like children socializing, these are some questions that, like, can my kids still go to group activities? Is social still distancing important for kids too? These are certain questions, especially under this category about like children socializing, that people might ask. And we're going to use this specific intent to produce like an outcome that our chatbot will like send you, especially when you ask it this certain intent. So one really great thing to kind of notify and like know about intents is that some of the best intents are ones where you kind of have a lot of different examples of how someone might ask it. I think might be like one of the most trickiest things, especially creating a Watson assistant, is figuring out how like a user might ask something, and making sure that there's a lot of different ways that people might ask a certain question is what will make your chatbot really strong. So once you do have your intent, here we actually have quite a lot. Preparing family guidance, we have things on reporting to work. Once you have this, another thing you might want to also include is entities. So entities are always really interesting because entities are basically, the way I like to think of it is basically the entity allows you to get like the valuable information you might need from the ask. And this piece of information is like maybe information that you might want to store into like a variable or something for like a future use. So it's basically information from the user's input that's like relevant to like a user's purpose. So basically, for example, if somebody asks something about like, what is like, if someone is asking like in a case like what location is something open, then maybe that location variable is an entity. So this is something that lets people, it lets the dialogue actually kind of like store that information to basically give you the right variable outcome afterwards. So in our case, some of the entities that we've created are like coronavirus. Definitely coronavirus is like a specific thing that within the ask we're trying to store. A really cool feature about intents is this thing called fuzzy matching. So fuzzy matching is really interesting because I think I want to say it's almost a new feature in Watson Assistant. It allows you to kind of set up entities in a way that even if people spell something wrong, or they, probably ask something in a different way, they will, Watson assistants like natural language understanding will be able to understand like what you meant in that case. So that's a really great feature. So I always, it's always good to keep like fuzzy matching on. Another great thing about intents or entities as well is like synonyms. So if, it actually recommends certain synonyms for you too. So especially when you're creating, you can use that synonym tool to find entities. So the one great thing, you can create your own entities, but Watson Assistant also allows you to have like system entities. So certain system entities, these are like location, number. So you can either, here we've set some of these things as on. So that way, when you're creating your dialogue, the Watson Assistant will already recognize a certain input as like a location or as a number. And this is already trained on some of these system entities. So this really helps, especially when you're creating an assistant from scratch. So once we have our intents and entities kind of created, the next thing that we want to look at is dialogue. So dialogue is actually where we kind of put everything together. So here we have like a dialogue tree. So basically what's going on here is that every single block that you see here is, it's a node. And so we set this up in such a way that we're actually trying to build off of each node. So if we look at our first node, the welcome, this one is usually it jumps to a greeting. So basically when you first hit the assistant, you'll see this greeting like, hello, like I'm the COVID communication bot ready to answer your questions. So a great way to actually try this out is by clicking on this try it panel. And there's something I probably missed showing you here. So this try it out panel, usually when you first import your assistant, it takes a little bit of time to train. So you want to give it some time before you can actually like play around with it, because it takes a little bit of time to kind of adjust the overall entities and dialogue. So here, as you can see from the first node, you're actually hitting this like, hello, I'm a COVID crisis bot. You're hitting this first greeting node. So, so like if you type in like hi, it says, hello, I'm the COVID crisis bot. So when I typed in hi, it actually, when you click on the what it returns, it actually returns the node where it's set up. So this hashtag greeting is actually an intent. So for example, if we go look at what this greeting node looks like, let's see, right here. So here are some of the greetings that we have set up. So, we could say aloha, and it'll know that you are sending it a greeting. So that's a very simple thing, but let's ask it something a little bit more interesting, like what is coronavirus? So here we can recognize that it recognized the entity coronavirus. So it understands like the input in the intent. And it's actually pointing us to this particular dialogue node where it's asking, where it's saying if the assistant recognizes the intent, what is COVID, as well as and its confidence score is greater than the lowest confidence score, then send back this piece of text, which is the text that we are actually telling you, like what exactly is COVID. So here we have like a couple of, like we have a lot of these dialogues kind of set up. So I can ask like what what are the symptoms? Current symptoms for COVID, it jumps to this dialog node where we've set up a symptoms intent, and which is greater than the low confidence score, and it gives us back this text. And one other thing I'd really like trying is kind of like playing around with it just to make sure that it's like, giving me back the right information. So I like to see what happens if I like spell things wrong, or if I am like rushing, like let's say coronavirus. So it definitely recognizes, like, even if you do spell things wrong, it recognizes like what you mean by that specific intent. So where can I get tested? So it understands that specific intent right here, testing and information. So yeah, I hope this kind of gives you an idea of basically how a little bit of this is built. So especially if you guys are playing around with this particular CDC COVID FAQ, an interesting thing you guys can try is actually creating your own intent. I know when we send out the starter kit, there's definitely a lot more questions that you can ask about like this, especially about COVID, that maybe you could try setting up your own intents and your own entities and creating a dialogue node that, can answer specific questions. And once we move on, I think we've done a lot of really fun things with this. We've actually set up webhooks and some other things as well. And I think Mofi's going to talk about that a little bit later. But before I kind of jump to something else, I wanted to show, like, there's, the options tab allows us to have like webhooks. You can actually get analytics. So I don't have this deployed yet anywhere, but once we do have this deployed, a really great thing is like seeing what kind of questions people ask. You can actually get the whole analytics of like how, what kind of conversations people are having, and etc.
That's
And
a
then
great way to improve the wiki, right? Improve the chat dialogue by watching the types of questions coming in and then tweaking and adjusting and making your chatbot experience better for the user.
Definitely. And that's like a really great use case. And I think we've seen that a little bit before with, especially troubleshooting and making sure like which questions are getting asked which way. And I think this analytics feature is actually really phenomenal. So I actually want to show you one more thing, a couple more things before I let Mofi go on. So once you have your crisis communication bot, one really great feature is this preview link. So, you actually get to see like this in action. So if you like basically share this link, I could actually, if I want, I could, I think I have to be logged into this account to actually share it, but let me, I'll probably share it. Let's see, I can probably share it in what? Okay. Well, first let's look at it. So, so basically what happens here is you can, like, this is the preview of the assistant. So it gives you like the whole user interface. So you can type something. So like, what is coronavirus? And like, so especially, this is a really great way because it's like, once you have this created, you can actually share this link to your colleagues, and it lets you like kind of capture what kind of people, like how people can interact with it. So this is already like a pre-created user interface. It's a whole pre-created bot. I want to show you one really great feature. So the Light account lets you have this pre-created preview link. However, I did mention a little bit earlier that you can have a plus account. So there's a 30-day free trial for the Plus account. And I think one of the best features on the Plus account, which I think you guys should try out, is if you go back to IBM Cloud, I've already created a Plus account. So I just want to show you basically, like, just to make sure. So Watson Assistant. So yeah, so right now the Lite is free, as well as the Plus trial is free for 30 days. I'll show you what that looks like. So let's see. So one of my services is actually a Watson Assistant Plus service. So I'm going to launch this assistant. And yeah, so I have this crisis bot created here. So one of the integrations that I've created on the Plus account is this web chat integration. So this web chat integration is actually really great because you can actually create, like, if you have any user interface out there, like if you're creating a, any static HTML, CSS, JavaScript web page, you can actually integrate this bot pretty easily into your web page. So it's pretty interesting because, you can change the color of this bot. So I'm going to make it maroon. And there's even ways to actually add like photos and stuff. But basically, it's just this little piece of JavaScript code. So once you save this change, and you take this piece of JavaScript code. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to copy this. So I actually have a JavaScript editor here. So this is like one of my editors, some random code. I'm going to just paste this code in and I'm going to run the code. And you'll see that this little chatbot pops up, which is really great. So, this is assuming that, you have any website out there, you can just add this script code and you can actually play around with it. And I think this is a great feature, especially on the Plus account. So if you are interested in trying and building your assistant, and especially on the Plus account, this is a pretty cool feature to have your Watson Assistant actually be deployed on any web page. So it's the Plus account makes it pretty easy to kind of customize and build like UI chatbots. So I think that's a really cool feature to definitely check out. So yeah,
that's a great feature. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I've been chatting with Watson Assistant Plus offering manager and just how important call for code is and the COVID-19 challenge. And he's really willing to extend the 30-day trial for folks in the call for code challenge. So jump over to the Slack channel and you can ask, well, if you want to build with this, you can ask and we can extend that trial without charge.
Cool. Yeah, so definitely, if you're creating an assistant, definitely create a Watson Assistant Plus account. A little bit later, I'll show you how to integrate with Slack as well. That's a really great integration. But I think the last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about where all your keys are. So I think Ukar is going to be chatting a little bit about creating a Node.js app. And I think John will be talking a little bit about building a Node-RED integration. So, there's a couple of different ways to kind of get your keys. So if you want your keys for your skill, they're actually under the, you actually have to click on the, you actually have to click on the skill and there's a view API details. And this is where all your skills live, your keys live. And then if you want to get the keys for your particular assistant, they actually live under settings and API details. So, so that's where you would get like your API keys. I think they're going to talk a little bit later about like how to work with them. And another really great thing about Assistant is actually you can export this whole skill. So it makes it really easy to, work in an agile way, work with like your colleagues or your teammates to build upon this assistant. I know with our team, we've been doing a lot of that. We've been trying to make our skills better and better. So we've been importing and exporting and making sure that our skills our CDC COVID skill is pretty strong. So definitely, that's a great feature of importing and exporting the JSON. I want to share a couple more things. So there's a lot of really great resources that we've also set up. So in our document section, we have a lot of like tutorials and documentation. If you're just interested in Assistant, we have a whole learning path. This is like an introduction to Watson Assistant. It'll teach you how to build like a pizza ordering app and like a banking chatbot. And there's a lot of different, I think with our Assistant, it's pretty like one-to-one matching in a way. So like every dialogue node matches with one intent, but you can actually get really in depth with this. You can, store system variables. You can, there's a lot of logic that you can play around with, especially. And I think with our specific assistant, we didn't go so in depth with our logic, but we have a lot of intents, which is great. But there's a lot more you can do, and it's a really powerful tool in that sense. So definitely
So a
check out.
developer might be able to take our starter kit and then incorporate some of those more advanced features,
Yeah,
sys location,
yes,
or extract entity. So I could ask multi-part questions,
definitely.
or multi-party questions too. You could have a live help agent plus the user plus the chat bot all listening in on the same chat experience, and then you get multi-user.
Yeah, definitely. And there's this whole like feature about slots, which I've used this feature in another demo, but this is a really great feature because if you can also like if you turn this on, and apply it, you can actually get like system variables. So you can save like different variables that you can actually call and capture in your code, which is really great. And you can integrate webhooks. Before I break this thing. You can integrate webhooks. You can integrate like a lot of really interesting features. So, Watson Assistant's really powerful. It's a really cool tool. We've just scratched the surface building this, but there's a lot of ways to make this a lot more robust and capable. And so feel free to check out some of our other tutorials and our other documentation. But yeah, just try this assistant out on your own. Definitely, try to get the web UI working. That's like a huge feature that like limits, that saves you a lot of time writing code, especially with this very, very simple script. So I think it's great. So yeah, I think with that, I'm probably going to just now hand it over to Mofi. I think
Right.
he's going to
So
talk
I
a
saw
little
one
bit.
of the features was the webhooks, right? And
Yes.
Mofi is going to take over the screen and he's going to share with us how to integrate. Remember, we had our external data sources, and we also wanted to call out to Watson Discovery and get some news sources. So Mofi, looks like you're going to do the second part of that first tutorial. Let's see if he's ready. He's still on mute though.
Aha, okay. When I shared my screen, it just jumped to the top. Got it. Hello, everyone. My name is Mofi. Pooja, thank you for getting us started. So at this point, if you're following along or later on you're watching the video and following along, you should have a chatbot deployed that you can go preview the link, try it out, play with it. But still, most of the data that are being used at the chatbot at this moment are coming from a static FAQ that we scraped from CDC website. For most of the use cases, this is fine if you're just giving people some information. This can help in a number of ways in terms of if it's a simple question, there is no reason to like call your local authorities because they're trying to help everybody as much as they can. There are certain cases where human interaction is absolutely necessary, but there are certain cases where people are looking for just simple information where introducing like a call to some place would make sure that like, it'll use up important time that could be used in helping someone really in need. So some of the answers that we are providing here kind of helps alleviate some of the burden on first responders and hospitals and things like that. But there are some other information that you probably want to provide that static information is not going to cut it. For example, what is the current stat of COVID-19 patient numbers in the US or your country, where we're calling from? Those are informations that you can't really have static because no one can be updating those skills over and over again. That's where having an API is very useful. And that's where Watson Assistant also comes with things like search scales and webhooks. So search scale, it does similar thing, which comes on the plus plan, which is under trial. You can definitely try it, but in this particular tutorial, we're going to show you how you can use something like a webhook to get the same information out. So those of us who are not familiar with webhook, it's basically just an API that you can make calls with. And in your Watson Assistant, again, I'm just jumping off from what Pooja has already built. So if you jump to the option pane, the first thing you see actually is the webhooks, and you have a place for an URL. This URL could be any like API that you can make calls to. And every time in your dialog node, you ask Watson to make a webhook call, it will make a request to this URL with any parameter you want to pass to it. To get our webhook working, we have a number of options. We could actually set up a server, have like application running anywhere. But to make it the most easy to use and most scalable, what we're going to make use of is Cloud Functions. So Cloud Functions, you also may hear the name serverless a lot. It basically is a code that is running as a unit operation somewhere else that you don't really have to worry about, like how long it's running for, how do you scale it. It just runs somewhere at the moment someone asks for it. So this is where Cloud Functions really shine. So you have Cloud Functions. IBM Cloud Functions is based on top of Apache OpenWhisk. It's an open source project that IBM contributed. A bunch of industry leaders are also working, like Adobe, ourselves. Apache Foundation is right now running it. So Apache OpenWhisk gives you a serverless platform where you could create things called actions. So actions would be a unit function that you can run. So we're going to create an action that can do a couple of things. One is make calls to an API. And for the API, we're making use of coronavirus COVID API, which actually uses the Johns Hopkins information. They update pretty regularly. Every couple of hours, they'll update the information. And it's a free to use API. So we're going to make use of that. The endpoint we're going to make use of is the summary endpoint. And if you make a call to that, information will look something similar. It will give you a global information of everything that is going on, as well as country-wise information of individual countries. If you scroll down, for example, Argentina has about 1,600 total cases, and the information was updated today at this time. So, I think that was yesterday. No, today at this time it was updated. So we're gonna make use of this particular endpoint. We're gonna also look at something called discovery. So those of you who are not familiar, discovery is a way you can look at raw information and gather insights out of it. For our use cases, we're not really looking at a particular fixed data set that we provided. Discovery comes pre-baked with news scoured through the entire internet. It basically goes through, finds news article, and it has over 12 million news articles. And for our keywords that we look for, it can match our news articles and give us information back. And for our chatbot, we have a couple of intent and dialogue where you can ask for recent news, and it will basically use the discovery and find some news articles that are kind of relevant.
Mofi,
One thing to notice,
web page for Watson Discovery that
yeah, I'm gonna jump to that. I'm gonna create the service. I'm just like, okay, so thank you for bringing that up. So I was about to got it. Okay, so you have the discovery service, and again, like most of our Watson services, we also have a light tier on the discovery service that you can create. And we're gonna create a new service actually for this one, and I'm gonna call it COVID chatbot discovery live stream. Naming things are always difficult, so it's a lifelong struggle of mine. But I'm going to create a new service, discovery service. And again, discovery, okay. So because I am on a shared account, I can't really create a light one. But for your use case, you should definitely be able to create a light account because you will have the only service. Each account can only have one light service of each service. So I'm going to create a regular service. But again, we're only going to use the feature that is available for the light as well. Okay. So again, it goes ahead and goes in the background and deploys me a discovery service. And I'm going to look for the service. Give it a second. So while that happens, so what discovery does and what you can do for your use case, let's say you have certain documentation provided by either your company or your maybe some information by CDC or your government. It's like a giant PDF documentation. There's a lot of information, and you want your chatbot to be able to make use of that information. In most cases, what would happen is, you either someone will go through manually kind of find information for the chatbot to find. But with discovery, what you could do, you basically ask question directly against a blob of information, like millions of lines of PDF, and discovery can parse through and find relevant information based on the keyword you're looking for. And this is still provisioning. So I'm going to just quickly open up one we already have provisioned because this is taking some time. This is the struggle of live demos. Things takes usually longer than usually take. So I'm going to open up and show you again the part we're using. Discovery is not we're not probably using discovery to its fullest, but we're still going to show off how webhooks and discovery together can give you a lot more information that you would have just gotten without. So if you create a discovery service, one of the things you're going to see here is Watson Discovery News. It's a pre-enriched data. So this is a data source available to every single discovery service that you create. And this one has, right now, again, it gets updated regularly. So last time I checked, it has a lower number than this, but right now it has 13 million documents, over 13.5 million documents in there. And so I can make queries against it. So I can basically, and this is just natural language, so you can actually put a text and it'll look for. So I'll say COVID-19, I'll just look for COVID-19. And on the right, you're gonna see that bunch of news articles popped up, and coronavirus outbreak, risk, pregnant woman phase, yada, yada. So you have a lot of different articles that just popped up. It found a bunch of different articles with the keyword here, and it could ask a number of different things, right? Like you can look for light bulbs, and you'll find something that are related to light bulbs in the news. And GE, again, very relevant. So one thing to notice here, these are articles from the internet. So you don't really have any way, Discovery doesn't really have any way to fact check beforehand. So when you use this particular service, you have to be careful that the news articles you're picking, have to be mindful that information might not be 100% accurate. But this is basically a public data source. For particular use case for discovery would be uploading a PDF that you can find information from. So we're going to move on and show you how the cloud functions now can work for getting information about like a COVID-19 summary as well as the discovery service. Again, every code we're going to show are available in the starter kit on our GitHub page. And if you go to kit and the folder name Webhook, you're going to see there's a folder called action underneath, and that's where our code of the action will be. So if you open that up, you're going to see there's a Node.js application, and it's about exactly 100 lines long, so it's not too long. And using the single webhook, we can actually make calls to multiple different ways. Again, simple programming parameters like if-else conditions. If we have a parameter type of API coming in, we're going to look into the API. Otherwise, we're going to try to talk to discovery service. So I'm going to basically create a discovery service, then go through creating a new cloud function, and then finally going back to the Watson Assistant and hooking all of that together and try it out and see if it actually gives us any data back. So I will quickly go back, and hopefully by now the service has been created. If it hasn't, we're going to just use the pre-provisioned one. COVID-19. Here's the one. I hope it finished creating. Okay, so it right now by this time it finished. Okay, it has got it. Okay, so one thing we're gonna basically use, we're gonna need the URL and the API key for our function to be able to talk to this. And if we jump to IBM Cloud Functions, IBM Cloud Functions here, we're going to click on Start Creating, and we're going to create a new function from scratch. So our functions, again, as I said earlier, is named action. So we're going to create a new action. You're going to give it a new name. We're going to call it COVID Livestream Action. And usually, we're going to create it in a default package right now. Keep it there, create the function. And by default, it comes back, creates a function for us that looks like this. And if you just try to invoke it, you'll see that it comes back with a result. So a function is nothing more than just like almost like a web application that you can get some API data back. So I just made a call, I got some data back, and the data was this particular data. So what I'm going to replace this with is our code. I'm going to quickly jump to raw, copy everything in there, and come back. Here, and I'm going to replace all of that with the function code. Quickly running through what this code does. So all our imports is coming from the top. We have the request because we're going to have to make an API call. We're also importing the discovery v1 service because we're going to make a call to discovery service. And I am generating a random int. I'm going to tell you what it does in a second. So I have the main function. If the parameter type is API, from our chatbot, if you're looking for API information, we will hit this branch, and then we will make a call to the summary API. Again, that is the response looks like. All of that data will come back. Once that does, I will, if there is a country information that we're looking for, we will basically go through and find that country and return the information. Otherwise, I'll just add up all the country's information and return the data as is. I just recently noticed that they're actually returning a global now. When we created the chatbot, the API was super new. At the time, they were not returning the global. So I'll probably go back and change that. And that's where building this in a way we were building, where we can just change things as we like build new things comes into play, right? We're working as a team, we're adding new features all the time. So again, now we have a global key right there, so we don't have to actually. So until now, what I was doing, basically going through each of the countries, adding them up. But now they have a global, we can just like pick that up and return data from there. So anyway, as of the code stands now, we're adding every single country information and finding the total cases, total deaths, and total recovered, and returning that data back. If you're not looking for the API, then right now you're basically looking for discovery, and we are making a call to discovery. You're gonna see a couple of things we need here is API key and URL, also env ID and collection ID. So where would we go find those? If you go to discovery, and it should be, if you're in the discovery and service page, you have a couple of things. You have the API key right here. You also have the URL that is also right here. So we're gonna basically copy those two things, jump into our functions, click on parameters, and you can click create parameters that are by default passed every single time. In your code, you can see that our main function gets a variable passed in, which is called parameters. And if you set some parameters on the left pane here, every single time the function is called, those parameters will by default be passed here every single time. So I will create some default parameters called API key, which would be, that is the URL. I will have to copy that back from here, API key. Okay. So again, this API key would be revoked. So again, I don't really worry about people stealing this API key because we will, after the end of this live stream, I'll go back and create new service credentials. That's another really useful feature in IBM Cloud. Service credentials are things that you can create on the fly and throw away after you are done using. Like I can just create a new credential and use that for our service instead of just keep using the same credential over and over. So I'll come back, and here I'll drop the URL. And a couple of other things, if you look at the code, you can see we need. One of them is called env ID, and one of them is collection ID. This is to do with our discovery service, and we have an environment and a collection. An environment is basically the discovery service we're using, and the collection is a particular set of things in the discovery. For the default Watson news discovery, if you look at this one, if you click on the API, you can actually see what the collection ID and the environment ID is. So you're going to pull these two information out. When you create your own particular discovery service and train it with your own data, you will see that you have a different collection ID and different environment ID there. So I'll copy those. I will go to the parameter, and I think I switched them. Okay, hold on. Nope, I'm still good. So collection ID is, no, I did switch them. So this is collection ID. And I also need env ID, which is system. Okay, so with these 4 parameters, we are actually ready to test our API. So I'm gonna save this, and we're gonna invoke with parameters. So as you know, we need the parameter which is named type as API. So I can test by saying, if I say my type is API, and I can then apply, and in the bottom, if I just invoke, if everything went well, we should see that a summary of the information came in. Again, this happened asynchronously, so I just made the call, and whenever the data comes back, it will come back. So we got a data, and it actually took about 1.5 seconds. Again, every time you're using serverless functions, you're dealing with something called the cold start. So I haven't called this function ever before. So first time I called it, it took some time for this function to spin up. So, but if I just were to call this again, the next time you would actually see the data coming back a little bit faster because the previous function just lingered and stayed around for serving the next request. So again, this information, this is just like querying it. So this time it took less than a second. So if you have a lot of people calling this function, each function would actually take less because there was a running instance already. Anyway, but the data came back was we have total this many cases, that many death, and that many recovered, and also tells us the news source. Again, this is everything we ourselves set up to return exactly from this line. If you don't send the parameter as API, if you don't send the parameter as that and just invoke it, this time it should respond with discovery information. And for discovery, what we're doing here is, I'm going to just wait for the data to come back. So what it does is it returns the title and a little text of 3 news articles that it can find. And for the discovery call, we are hard coding the word coronavirus news, unless the user manually puts some input themselves. And on the top, we had a function called getRandomInteger. So because discovery has already scraped the internet and found however many results it has found, the result for every call you make, if you make a call like one after another, information will be pretty similar. It will be basically the same until the next update happens. So just to give our chatbot a little bit of randomness, what I have done here is pulled out 50 of the discovery articles that came back and returned randomly 3 of them. So that's why the random number is doing. Again, for your use cases, this might not make sense, but to make our chatbot a little bit more random, we did that. So now we know that our function, it works by itself here, but does it work with our actual chatbot? That's what you want to find out. Functions comes with a great tool called Enable as Web Actions. So I can, the moment I select and save this, I now have this URL where I can make HTTP request. And you could make this URL behind some API gateway where you can have authentication or things like rate limiting other things. But for our use case, you're going to just keep it just like a raw HTTP request, and it's going to be open so anyone can make calls to this. So I'm going to just copy this, jump to my chatbot again, and which is right here. And I'm going to drop this in the URL section. And to get JSON response back from our web action, all you have to do is add .json in the end. And that should be all we have to do. So I'm going to jump to our dialog and I'm going to try it. And because, as Pooja said earlier, the moment you change something in Watson Assistant, you see that Watson is training. So again, all the new information that Watson Assistant got is going to take some time and train so that it can use the new information. And again, that panel went away. So I'm going to basically just what's in the news. Hopefully this works. Again, live. Okay, great. It did work. So it made a call to the API. Again, you saw that the API call came back pretty fast, and it found 3 news articles. So it found 3 news articles, and in the end, I can make a request again. What's in the news? And if I scroll down, you're going to see that after it found 3 articles again, and I hope they're not the same articles. I'm going to quickly see. No, they're not the same. Because again, we pick the top 50 and send back 3 random ones. That is the case where you're looking for news. So you were using Discovery to find the news. What if you want information about COVID-19? So you can say how many cases so far. And this one, you will see that we hit the how many cases intent, and it gives us the total cases. And it also asks, then we have other dialog nodes that ask us if you want information about specific country. And I'm going to say yes. And it's going to ask me what country we want the stat for. And I don't know, I want the stat for Ireland today. Let's see if we know any information about Ireland. And we know information about Ireland now, which is total cases 5,700, total death, and total recovered. And again, every time we jump into one of those, you can see that we're using this particular dialog node. And dialog nodes are basically just a tree. So you can create branches. You can go deeper into one. So you have this API dialog node. And after someone asks how many cases, we can actually go into if they want country information or not. We can jump deeper into those nodes. Quickly show you how it looks like to enable webhook for a particular action. So if you look at what's in the news, so that's going to be the news one. And there's a lot of dialog nodes. So if you see it before me, stop me. Okay. Of course I can. Okay, latest news on COVID-19. It was right below where I was. It's always the last place you look. So you basically, if you want to enable by default, let's look at a node where we don't have webhook enabled, what it looks like. So if you're just looking at it, it has assistant response with text. So we have a hard-coded text here. You could actually have variation of text response. So Watson Assistant will randomly respond to one or the other. But if you want to enable webhook, all you got to do is click on customize and just click on webhooks to on. I'm not going to enable to this one, but I'm going to show that this one has webhooks enabled. So what it does is that I can send any parameter I want. For the API one, I am sending the parameter type equals API. Again, from our functions, we are looking for this parameters type equals API here. That's what we can see here as well, where we're just sending the type as API. And when the response actually comes back, we are saving that response as the variable summary, and we can jump into what we do with this. With the summary, we can send the text back. Summary has a field called result. We can send that as text as well. And finally, we can send the next text. And then when they respond, we can take the country info. So the response could be basically yes or no. Here, we're also making use of entities, where entities are things like reply. So you can understand if the user replied with an entity, like if the user replied with a reply. It's also a bad naming, but we're generally bad with naming with things in computers. So that's where it's just like giving a taste of how you can almost like supercharge your chatbot with giving it API power. And with the same webhook, with just using simple if-else conditions, I could now see that I can keep on adding like more and more new the functionality. Just to look back on the chat, and there was a question by Filmy Void. I'm going to just quickly answer that before I'm going to finish my part here. The question was, I usually find it difficult to train difficult entities like prescription, drug names, or protein names without having to do so using a model I have access to on my end, like Spacey and Prodigy. I'm just wondering how you would recommend I lean on Watson to do the entity training. So couple of ways to deal with this. Again, I don't know the specifics of what you're trying to get out of the drug names, but if it is a fixed set of names, as long as your entity covers like all the possible use cases with all the kind of spelling, which can be pretty difficult, but you could also lean on something like Webhook. When a question comes in and you don't understand, you can handle it via your Webhook. So there's two kind of ways you can deal with this. For example, for coronavirus, what we ended up doing is going through and typing in all sorts of misspelling and different spelling of corona, because we have, like in Twitter, people are typing corona as corona with K, with all sorts of misspelling. So if you just give it all possible options, it can have a better chance. With fuzzy matching as well, it has a better chance of understanding what you're trying to say. But for protein names and things like that, I don't think Watson entity will by default have a pretty good chance in understanding what you're trying to say. So in those cases, probably you can fall back and lean on webhooks to handle questions when you don't understand it. And it's a pretty useful feature because you could do things like try to answer a question, and if that fails, you can fall back to webhook. So for our use case, one of the things we have done is like, if I just type in some word that I don't understand in this, it actually will fall back and try to use discovery to give us something, right? Again, this use case was to just show off discovery and as a fallback option, but you can think of the webhook as a fallback option for your use case, where if you, so this one, when I typed in computers to our chatbot, our chatbot didn't have any idea what it meant in the context of coronavirus things. So it just fell back onto anything else. And in our anything else, we'll make a call to webhook. And so again, the articles that came back probably doesn't make the most sense because we're trying to find that word plus coronavirus. So it probably doesn't make the most sense, but it can still fall back and try to find answer. So with that, I think this is my time talking about coronavirus, COVID-19 chatbot plus webhook and discovery, how you can superpower and supercharge your chatbot into making it better and more useful for your user. With that, we're gonna just go on a short break. And after we come back, we're gonna have another wonderful speaker, Upkar, joining us. He just finished his live stream. Many people probably already has seen it. If you are coming from there, welcome. And so we're gonna just take a quick short break and we're gonna have Upkar joining when we come back.
Glad we're back. So next up, we've got Upkar is going to talk about the integration of our Slack chatbot with a website. So we wrote a tutorial on that. And so if we scroll to the bottom, we can let Upkar take us through that.
Perfect. Thank you, John. So yes, as you heard from Pooja and Wolfie about the other two integrations that we have with our wonderful COVID-19 chatbot. It's a great resource to get started with our Call for Code challenge, and also, sort of tackle this pandemic we're in right now. So the part that I want to share with everybody now is connecting this chatbot to a website. Now, when Pooja went through her demo, there is in the Assistant Plus plan, Pooja showed a button to create some code that you can then use in your website, which is great, right? If you want even more customization, or if you want to, for some reason, create the code from scratch, then we have this handy tutorial that you can use. So let's go to this tutorial for connecting your chatbot, communication chatbot with a website. All right, so it brings us to this homepage for the tutorial. And let me share real quick. So there's a GIF on the top here that shows you what the actual website looks like. We'll go into the details in a minute here, but it's a Node.js Express app in the back end with some HTML. And this is what the HTML looks like. We have also, to help out developers, there is a feature where it shows the JSON that's coming back from Watson Assistant when the web application talks to it. So that output is also shown as a slider on the right-hand side. John, so let's, can I go ahead and actually create this from scratch and show people how easy it is to get started with this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so assuming you already have an IBM Cloud account from the last two demos that you saw, if not, get one. And this tutorial also uses IBM Cloud CLI to actually push the application to IBM Cloud, the Node.js app itself. We will first run it locally, so you know how to do that. And then we will, using the CLI, deploy it on IBM Cloud. All right, so let us go to, I see there's, okay, here, this is what I wanted to show next. Let me increase the font a little bit so you can see the picture better. So this is the architecture diagram for this tutorial. To read this, it's really simple. The user comes in and they open a URL on their browser. That in turn, it's a Node.js app. And the Node.js app is whatever the user enters in the Node.js app is sent to Watson Assistant. That is where your conversation lives. And John, I really like that we are keeping the conversation part of this separate from our integration, right? So the conversation itself is the back and forth, it's the dialogue as Pooja explained, it's the slots, the digressions, the handlers and all of that good stuff, the entities and everything else. And then our website is just an interface to that conversation. Wolfie covered the functions bit. The Watson Assistant is using Webhook to talk to IBM Cloud functions, and using discovery and all of that good stuff. So let's focus on the Node.js bit. So going down here are the steps to follow along if you're doing this now or later. The first step here is to clone the GitHub repository that has all the code. So I'll do that now. I'm opening the tab or opening the GitHub repo in a new tab. And then I'll simply click on this clone button and copy the URL to clone this repository. Alternatively, you can also download the zip file to your desktop. Now I'll go to the terminal, and I have a temp directory. There is nothing in this directory, as you can see on the right-hand side. Let me increase the, oops. And my terminal just crashed, which is very interesting. All right, I just opened it back. I think it's mandatory to have at least one crash during live demo, so I'm glad we got through that part. Okay, so let me clear the screen. We are back to a blank terminal, and let's clone that GitHub repository. So git clone, and I give it the URL. All right, so this is downloading our open source project into my desktop. Give it a second. Okay, So if I do a list directory now, there is a new directory with my code in it. So let's cd into that directory, do another listing. Okay, I want to go into my starter kit directory, and this is where all of the integrations live. So the COVID simple directory has the Node.js app. So let's cd into COVID simple. All right, and let's see what's in this. Oops. I'm going to open the code in my favorite editor, which happens to be VS Code at this time. And let's see what's in that directory. So here's our COVID simple directory. It's a Node.js app. If you haven't worked with Node.js before, it's essentially a JavaScript runtime, or used for a bunch of things. But one way is to create website backends on this, front end and backend. And so we are using a framework called Express.js. The first thing I like to do when I download a new Node.js repository is go look at what's in package.json. Package.json essentially has all of our dependencies listed in this in the file. So if I look here, if I go, there's some metadata up top. The script section is important. It tells you how to start this app, how to run the different tests within this app, etc. And if I go down to my dependencies, you can see there's a bunch of dependencies here. And I do want to point out a couple here. So there is body parser, which is used to parse the responses coming into your website or coming into your backend. There's a .env package. All these packages are hosted on npm, which is the registry for Node.js. And .env is a package used to read environment files. We store all of our credentials in the environment file. Then there's a dependency for Express. And Express.js is a framework to build websites. And then, of course, we have a dependency for the IBM-Watson SDK. We use the APIs inside of this module or package to talk to Watson Assistant. So to carry out a conversation, you have to import this package and then use it in your code. There are also some developer dependencies, which I won't go into right now, but these are the main ones I wanted to point out. And at this point, let's now look at some code. So we looked at package.json. The start script in package.json is calling server.js. So let's look at server.js. If I go to server.js, first thing it does is requires the .env package and configures it. And then it imports everything from the app.js file. So we'll look at that in a minute. The next step in this file is to declare a port, which can come from the environment or default it to 3000. And then it just runs the server. So the server starts and listens on that port. And if I go to app.js, this is where all of the magic happens, right? This is where my website is. So I'm importing my Express.js framework, my body parser, my Watson Assistant APIs, and some authentication libraries. And then down here, you can see I start my Express.js. I tell it where the static content lives. I tell it what body parser to use. And then eventually, I am connecting to Watson Assistant. As you can see here, all of our URLs, all of their credentials, including our secret API keys, usernames, passwords, etc., are sitting inside my env file. And then down here, I'm defining some APIs. So there's an API called API/API/message. That's where my front end will send a message to, and that in turn will talk to Watson Assistant. It creates a payload in line 73 to 80. And once it creates a payload, it can then send that to Assistant using this message method or function. So fairly easy. There's also an API to start a new session. Okay, speaking of the environment variables, we have provided a sample env file, the env.example. And this is where you see a couple of things defined. So there's the assistant URL, assistant IG. I believe Pooja showed a little bit of where to grab these IDs and keys from within your Watson Assistant. So I won't go over that again, but grab your keys from there and you essentially put it here. Now, I've already done that for one of my assistants. So what I'll do here is, let's open the terminal in here as well. Okay, so what I'll do here is instead of copying .env.example into .env and then grabbing all the credentials from Watson, I will just copy my, oh, look at that. I already have this command here. I must have done this earlier today. So I'll copy to the .env file to, in this case, it will come to just this directory. All right, so I now have a .env file with all of my credentials. I'm not going to open that for obvious reasons. And what I'll do next is, let's start this out. So before I do that, let me jump back to the GitHub to show you all of these steps actually have been documented inside the GitHub repository. So if I'm going too fast, or if you're trying to follow along, you can always also go to this GitHub repo and follow the README file under COVID simple. So far, we have cloned the repository, we have copied the file over. I have my credentials saved from another file, but you would get that from IBM Cloud. And the next step to do would be simply to install all of our dependencies and then start our application to test it out. So let's do that. And again, the env.example file, this is the assistant ID. If I currently have it set to something that's already deployed, assuming you saw the previous sessions, Pooja deployed that Watson assistant. So if I pick that ID, my app will talk to that assistant. Okay, so actually, let's just use this terminal here. So I want to do an npm install. And what that does basically is it grabs all of the packages in my dependencies in the package.json file. So if I go back to package.json, it's essentially grabbing all of these dependencies, the body parser, the .env, the express framework, IBM Watson SDKs, and it's installing it locally into a folder called node modules. So you'll see that folder show up here as soon as this finishes. So give it a second. And Pooja, Mofi, John, please chime in if anything needs clarification. All right, we're almost there. I read a joke somewhere, npm install and it downloads the world, and it seems very true in this case. Your dependencies have dependencies that have dependencies that have more dependencies. So
yeah, the other day I was purging my computer, like could get some more space out. I deleted, I think, 24 gigs of just like node module folders.
That I believe you. You basically get all of the internet in the same npm install. Okay. So there you go. It's, as promised, created a folder called node modules. If you see, every dependency that we specified and their dependency trees have been installed as a folder here. So all good in that front. And the next step, if you read the GitHub README, is essentially to do an npm start. And as the package.json file says, that calls node. That basically starts the server.js file with the node command. So npm start should start my server. And it says listening on port 3000 because that was my default port. Okay, so let's go back to our browser. And let's have this thing open on the side here. So I've multi-screen here for two different windows. So here's my chatbot. I've increased the font a little bit. Okay, so by now you should be familiar with the conversation part of it at least, right? So this, again, this is just surfacing or interfacing with that conversation or assistant over a website. Pooja showed you the try panel. John, I'm not sure if Node-RED is in the pit has been shown yet or if that'll come later, but that would be another interface.
Yeah, I'm going to do the Node-RED integration with voice after Pooja does the integration with Slack.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So folks, you have to stick around for John's presentation. That's always wonderful. Okay, so here's our assistant. It says, hello, I'm COVID crisis communication bot, ready to answer your questions. How can I help you? And at this point, I can ask it questions that, sort of Pooja was showing before with the tribe panel. Here on the right, like I said, we have some information about the session. So there's a session ID. This was the endpoint/API/session that was called. And then at the bottom are the output that's coming back from Watson. So this is what Watson understands and responds with. So in this case, if I say what is COVID and send it to Watson's system, it comes back with what coronavirus is or what COVID is. If you look on the right-hand side here, it tells me what all different intents match this utterance, this user utterance. So what is COVID? Exactly match the intent. What is COVID with a confidence of 100%. And it also identified an entity called coronavirus inside my sentence, tells me where, and then also confidence of 100% or 1. And then it gives me a text back, which is shown here on the left-hand side. So fairly easy to get up and running with this website. Again, if I go back to the code here, let's look at the front end real quick. So I showed you the back end in app.js and server.js. All of the front end is living in the public folder. So there's, we've used a bunch of CSS. By the way, this was an open source application developed by IBM developers as a code pattern. So we have borrowed from that open source app to create this new open source app for COVID-19 and customized it for our use. So thank you for open sourcing all this. Very cool. Again, give the CSS file gives it the look, and we have the JS file, which is where the front end is. So we've created a bunch of libraries. So there's a common.js, which holds all the util files. The conversation.js holds the conversation panel, and it's got its own CSS defined in here as well. And then finally, I want to show you what the API looks like. So the API.js file, that's what the HTML file will import and talk to. This in turn talks to the two message endpoints. The two endpoints. One is called message endpoint, the other one is called session endpoint that were defined in our server.js file in the backend. Now, it just so happens that in this case, the front end and the back end are packaged in one folder as an Express.js app. So you could have them sitting separately. All right, and then there's a bunch of functions defined here on what to do when a response comes back, how to send a text to Watson Assistant, and of course, the first thing you do is create a session and set up a session ID before you can talk to Watson Assistant. And so line number 51, that's how you send a request to Watson Assistant. And it's just, as you can see, it's just talking to the message endpoint, which is defined in our server.js backend file. Okay, again, not to get into too much into the weeds here. You can download this and look at the code. If you find any bugs, create an issue in our open source repo. If you have any recommendations, improvements, or alternate ways of doing things, then of course, you can fork it, create a PR. We're happy to take in contributors, and that's I guess that's the beauty of open source. So we welcome that, obviously. The last thing I want to show, John, and since we took that break, I forgot to see exactly when we started, but I do have one more thing to show, and it'll take maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So the last thing I want to do is deploy this application to IBM Cloud. Now, we are deploying this as a Cloud Foundry application, Cloud Foundry Node.js application. And again, the instructions are also in the README file. The first thing I want to do is log into my IBM Cloud account. So let me do that. Actually, let's go back here, right? This terminal is, I feel, is better suited because it's inside the VS Code. Let me make this window bigger. Okay. So now we can do IBM Cloud login. And let's see if I remember this. This is I have a lot of accounts to test things out. Okay, it's not happy. Let's try one more time. Okay, this is fun. Let's try one more time. I will get it this time, I promise.
Which one do you think it is?
If nothing works, I'll log into my IBM one. Hey!
You got it.
All right, that one worked. Okay, it's asking me to upgrade. That may potentially break changes. Not right now, please. I'll say no. Not that brave. Okay, so it's logged me into IBM Cloud, and the next thing I want to do is put in this command, which targets a Cloud Foundry as my main working space. So once I do that, you'll see what it does. It essentially gives me an org and a space to work in. So it's given me this org, which is my email address, and the space is developing right now. Let me also do target this group. Now, I just said IBM Cloud login, and that's why I have to do this piecewise, one thing at a time. But if you put in the longer IBM Cloud login command and give it all of this information, then you don't have to do it again and again. So I have to do this one time. Okay, I think it's capital D. So I'll set my resource group real quick. All right, let's see. This is all working as designed. I am obviously I meant for all these failures to occur, so we can show you how
the spelling of default was wrong.
No way. I thought I was a good speller.
It's DE. There we go.
So Mofi codes, Mofi names, and Mofi spells. Thank you, Mofi.
We have so many great podcast ideas. We're gonna just like so Nigel and Upkar in chat suggested that we start a podcast where I would just go about naming things. So just naming variables, naming things.
In different languages. I love it. And you would go camel case in one and use hyphens in the other. Yes, I can't wait.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm finally successfully have logged into my IBM Cloud account, and in order to deploy this application as a IBM app, we have provided a handy manifest file here. So this is how you would deploy. Now, I just want to say I have a bunch of applications deployed under this account. So you'll see, there's of course a limit on when you're using the free tier on how much memory you can use and how many apps you have deployed. So hopefully this works, but just in case, I'm going to rename my app. I'm just adding -1 at the end because this name needs to be unique. And then if I go back to my GitHub file, all I need to do is IBM Cloud app push to push this to IBM Cloud. So let's see how that works. All right, so it's looking at the manifest file. And you can see here, it picked up the new name from the manifest file and it's trying to deploy that to IBM Cloud. So give it a second. The IBM Cloud app command or plugin to the IBM Cloud CLI, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do as well. So take a look at that as when you're playing with IBM Cloud CLI. It's very how do I say there's a bunch of things, and it'll be hard to go through all of them in this stream. So let's see, it's almost done.
So Ukar, I actually, before you joined, I actually showed some of the users, the attendees, how to build the Node chat script. So yeah, you're showing exactly how to build the application. So you can kind of do this in a similar way. You can build the JavaScript app and create, install the script and then just push it to Cloud Foundry. So that's a really great way to build out some of these applications. Well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so it's deployed my application. It's waiting for it to start, and it says it's running. It also gives me the endpoint for my application on IBM Cloud. And if I were to now go to my browser, open a new tab, and let's go to this one. As you can see, This is the one, this is not localhost anymore. It's the one on Ibm Cloud. All right, so here's the same application running on Ibm Cloud. We have deployed it as a Cloud Foundry Node.js application from scratch after running it locally. There also, we didn't, ideally we would also run a whole bunch of tests. We would have a CI/CD pipeline to deploy it to Ibm Cloud. But for the purposes of this example, and given the short time, I think this suffices to show that it's how easy it is to push this to Ibm Cloud. So again,
Yeah,
if I say hello, and then maybe I ask what are the symptoms, then it comes back again. This is hitting the deployed version of Watson Assistant deployed on Ibm Cloud with the credentials in the .env file. Anyways, let's see if there are any questions. All the services I've seen so far have been free. No, that is exactly right. All of the stuff we have showed you has a free tier or some sort of initial free offering. So with Watson Assistant, with Watson Discovery, you get the free tier. With IBM Cloud Functions, there's a very generous initial free buffer before this it starts or kicks in the pricing. And there is a pricing calculator built inside Watson inside IBM Cloud Functions that you can use to see what that looks like. But that is correct. To do all of the stuff we're showing you today, you do not need to provide a credit card. All right, John, I think, I'm not sure if I took all of my 30 minutes, but I am pretty
That
much
was
done.
great,
Is there
Omkar. So now what in your tutorial, you showed us how to very simply create a Node.js app and push to IBM Cloud and embed the chatbot right into it. That was cool. All right, so next up, we're going to switch back to our crisis communication starter kit. And one of the additional integrations is the ability to embed our chatbot into a Slack experience. And so next up, we've got Pooja coming back to teach us how to take our chatbot, which we've already built, and now we're going to integrate into a Slack workspace. So go ahead, Pooja.
Awesome. Thank you, John and Ukar. So let me start sharing my screen. Okay. Great. So far in this entire application, I think what we really wanted to show everyone is how, you have a tool like Watson Assistant, you can do so much with it. You can, integrate a webhook, you can integrate it into a Node.js app. One of my favorite ways of integrating this Watson Assistant is on Slack. And I know right now with with everything that's going on around with COVID, and so many more people are using Slack to stay in touch with their colleagues, as well as, using Slack to work. We wanted to build this integration just to kind of as the inspiration, especially now how we've completely changed how we work today in terms of social distancing. And so Slack has become a tool, especially I know at IBM, we're one of Slack's largest users, enterprise users. We use Slack every day, especially in terms of our day-to-day communication. So ideally what we wanted to do is figure out how we can integrate an assistant like this through building a Slack app. And the one really great thing about the COVID crisis, about Watson Assistant, is that it has a lot of these manual integrations set up automatically. So actually, when you go to your Watson Assistant, there's this section called just integrations, and it's actually very easy to integrate a Slack app. So Slack is actually one of our easy third-party integrations. So it's actually, a pretty easy 3-step process. And I'm going to walk you guys through how to set this up. I think if you're interested in building a Slack app, the first thing that you would want to do is actually create a space. So, oops, let me see. Did I stop sharing my screen?
Yes, you did.
Okay, 1 second. Let me go back. Okay, sorry about that. Let me just start sharing my screen again. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Um,
So you do have to have administrative access into this Slack workspace to do some of these steps, right?
yes, definitely. Am I good again now? Yeah.
Yep, we see you.
Awesome. Okay, great. So the one thing that you want to do is you want to have administrative access to your workspace, which means that you want to be able to create apps. You want to be able to install apps. There's a lot of really different ways to create apps. The one that we're going to show today is, is going to be like one of the main like workspace apps, and it's going to be like an external app that we'll create. But with Slack has a lot of great documentation, and there's different ways to interact with it. You could create a bot that integrates in a channel. You could create like a standalone bot. You could create slash commands. So at some point, I do want to do like some sort of like webinar series on how we can create all these different ways, or how we can integrate IBM Cloud with Slack, because there's so many different ways to do it. But for this webinar, for this use case, we wanted to really talk about like the easiest integration, which is an inbuilt integration with a Watson Assistant. So step number one, make sure that you have a Slack workspace created. This will be your sandbox to kind of like install things. I have one created. I created this workspace a long time ago for this hackathon thing that I was doing in Boston, and now it's just become my sandbox because nobody else plays around with it except me, which has been great. So I'm glad I kept this workspace around for me to build a bunch of apps. So after you have your app, it's actually a pretty easy step process. So step one, create a Slack app. So if you go to your apps, I've already played around with Slack a little bit, so I have a lot of apps created. The first thing that you might want to do is you want to create a new app. So when you create a new app, you want to give this Slack app a name. So I'm going to give this guy a name, so COVID Crisis Bot. Okay, and you want to choose your workspace. So this is where having a workspace for you to use and have administrative rights to is important. So make sure you have a workspace that you can play around with. So this is my workspace. So I'm going to create an app in here. So, okay, awesome. So now that we are creating a Slack app, there's a lot of different features here. So basic information. This is going to be like the base place for you to build and get your credentials. I want to point out a few things. So before, Slack API's documentation is actually really great. So this will kind of, if you just click here on the documentations panel, you can kind of read a little bit about like the different kind of apps you can make. There's a lot of features here. I haven't had a chance to explore all of them yet, but for integrating with Watson Assistant, we're only going to actually really be looking at a few things. So let's see. So let me go back to my app. Where was I? I think I lost it. Okay, this is the app. So, okay, great. So step number one is pretty easy. So on the Slack information, go to the basic information tab and find the app credentials. So let's go to, I'm going to close some of these so I don't get lost. So the first thing you're going to do is get the app credentials. So the app credentials section, this is where all your client and secrets and verification tokens exist. So for this case, I'm just going to create one from scratch. I'll probably delete it. So afterwards, I've been able to create a lot of different Slack apps multiple times. And that's a really great thing about using the Slack APIs is like you can regenerate and recreate as many times as you want. Copy your verification token. So let's get our verification token. So that's this guy. So I'm going to paste this guy in. What I like doing here first is I actually like giving it an icon. You want to give it a photo. So I have this little photo. It's a scary looking virus thing. So I'm going to put that in. I want to, make sure that my background color is there. Just give it COVID-19 crisis bot. So this is going to be the display information. So when you install your app, you'll be able to see like this bot. So let me make sure I save my changes. Okay, awesome. So that is step number one, pretty easy. So step number two. Oh, we're actually on step number two. We're going to need to go to the auth permissions tab and enter in like the bot token scopes. So scopes are basically like commands that let you, give you your bot like different permissions. So it's pretty simple here. So there's already a bunch of predefined scopes. If you click here, you'll be able to read like a lot of these different predefined scopes. So this allows like your bot to do and gain access to a lot of different features. We want to give our bot a couple of 5 different scopes here. So the scopes we're going to give it is we're going to give app mentions read, and that lets our messages that lets like any messages involving like the bot involved in that conversation. We're going to give it write access, chat write access right here. So let's see, chat write. We're going to give this I am history, I am read, and I am write. So I am history, I am read, and I am write. So these are certain scopes that, Watson Assistant itself has suggested in terms of, giving it this access to build this out. This is important when we create this app, and it'll give it the right permissions. So once we do that, the next step is actually to just install this app into our workspace. So this is pretty easy. So once we click on install, you're actually allowing your bot to get permissions, give it permission access, and allow it to install on the Slack workspace that you're looking at. So if you do allow, and now what happens is you get this access token. And so this was something tricky, I think, on the Watson Assistant side on step number 3. You're going to actually need this access token for both fields here. I know they're named a little bit differently, but you're going to need this same access token for both of these things because this will allow you to allow your Slack to access Watson Assistant to access your Slack bot. So make sure you have both of these as the same authentication token in here. So once you have that, we're actually on one of the last steps. So you're going to need to generate a request URL. And so just click generate. And basically what this is this is the API, this is the URL for Watson Assistant. So this actually, I think, embeds your API key for Assistant that you can actually subscribe to as an event on the Slack Slack end. So all you really need to do here is just copy that. And if you go to the event subscription page, right, and you turn this guy on, you can just actually paste your request URL here. And once you see that green check mark that is verified, that means that your Slack app and Watson Assistant can, they're talking to one another, and you can send from your assistant HTTP requests to your Slack app. So yeah, I think, and then the last, one of the last things here is you're going to need to subscribe to bot events. So message.im, this is gonna like listen for events on that channel, and then basically app.mention, that lets you lets the bot listen for messages or mention that event. So you want to set those two things up here as well. So subscribe to bot events are right here, message. What is it? Message.im. Okay. And then add the other one, app underscore mention. And now you want to make sure you save those changes. And I think the last step to this integration is you can edit the display name and make sure that your bot is always online. So in app.home, there is a, there's a thing right here. So that just shows your app is all online. I kind of like this display name, COVID crisis bot, so I'm going to keep that. And yeah, so now let's see. I think what you can do here is you just save those changes. And now you have the Slack integration set up. So now if you go check out your Slack workspace, within the apps section, you can actually search for this app. So you see that it actually shows up right here. So your app is now like successfully integrated into Slack. So, you can ask it hi, and you have a working app. What is coronavirus? And yeah, we can even test out the webhook. What is in the news? So yeah, I think it's a very easy integration. Within our, we have so many IBM Slack channels. We've actually tried integrating this bot in our IBM workspace as well, within, to have more people interact with it. So it's a pretty fairly simple integration. I think, it allows you to actually integrate it pretty seamlessly, and Slack, it has a lot more different features as well. So this is interesting as well, because the one great thing about having a Slack app is also how, low, how it's not so, I want to say infringing in a way, because I know sometimes with Slack, there can be if you have a bot that's in a channel that can, have a lot of exposure, and a lot of times people don't want to have something that's constantly interacting with them, but this allows users to actually install the app on their own workspace, interact with it and the way that they want to interact with it. And it's a great bot in that sense, just because it allows any Slack user to kind of install it the way they want to install it. So I think that's pretty much the overall gist of integrating with Slack. It's fairly easy overall. Of course, there's a lot more, ways to interact with Slack and Watson, but it's great that Watson Assistant provides such a seamless feature. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I wanted to just show that really quick feature just to make sure everyone is, knows that that's a capability. Let's see. I want to see if there's any questions around that.
Yeah, there was a question not on Twitch, but on another channel on how do you deploy the Slack bot to a website? And that's an interesting question. I think it'll be useful to make it clear the difference between what we call bot, which is like our conversation or a skill, versus then you deploy that as a bot on, could be Slack or could be Alexa or could be Google Home or could be a website like we have demonstrated. Um, and so there's a difference between a conversation, which is what you're building, the back and forth, the intelligence to digress away from a dialogue and come back to a node, being able to recognize intents and entities. That is the conversation bit, and then of course you can take that into Slack, you can take that into a website, you can take that where on a different platform.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing Slack.
For sure. And I think like the overall gist of this is that, Watson Assistant's a really great tool, especially because you can build everything that needs to be built out for your bot in this one specific tool. You can build out webhooks, you can build out all these things, and then you can integrate it with so many different things. Like Slack is one integration, but you can also integrate it, like with Google Home and like all these other different ways. And, it's just very, very seamless to do that. John is actually going to talk about speech to text integration, which is really interesting, right after me. So you definitely want to stick around for that because he's going to be using Node-RED to actually integrate this. But, the overall, I think the sky is definitely the limit, especially with our starter kits. Like we wanted to just show you like a few different ways you can integrate it. Slack is one. So I hope you guys can kind of take this forward and, try out different integrations along with this. So yeah, I think that's all I have for that, John. I think I'm excited to have everyone see your speech to text integration as well. So
Good.
yeah.
Thank you, Pooja. That was wonderful. So integration, lots of different techniques. And so I'm going to wrap up in the next 30 minutes or so with a demonstration of our final tutorial, which is how to integrate our chatbot with a voice-enabled Node-RED flow. So if you go to our Getting Started Starter Kit page and scroll towards the bottom, you can find the last tutorial, which is loaded here. And I'll walk through the tutorial and then I'll show you it live and then we'll go build it. So what we want you to do is learn how to use Node-RED. I'll introduce you to Node-RED and what that's all about. We can run it both local, we can run it in IBM Cloud, and we're going to actually deploy in both cases. You do need to install Node-RED local if you don't yet have it. So you can visit nodered.org and jump up to the documentation. There's some great tutorials here in the Get Started category on how to run it local. We actually provide you some instructions if you're a Linux user. We've got Docker containers. If you're running on a Raspberry Pi, there's a command. So I've already installed Node-RED local on my system, and I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. The next thing we will do is we need to add some additional components to it. So we'll install some extra packages here. And I'll tell you how to do that. And then you've already created the chatbot. I've got the credentials for our chatbot over in another window, and we'll bring that into our flow. Takes about 30 minutes, so let's go give it a try. We've got ourselves an architecture diagram here to step you through. So our user will interact with our Node-RED flow. We've built a dashboard. I'll show you how to do that. It's going to call out to Watson speech to text, and we send it a WAV file. So we will record a voice here in as I'll talk to my chatbot. I get back a transcript. I send that to Watson Assistant. It does all the magic that we just showed you for the last 2 hours, and then comes back with an answer, which I send to Watson text to speech. I get back a WAV file and I play that to our user. So kind of clever flow there. And the response times, demo gods fingers crossed, should work great. So that's the flow and architecture of our description here. So if you've never played with Node-RED before, one thing that you will find, it's very simple to get started. It's a visual programming technique. So there are a set of nodes in our palette. We've got our flow in the middle. We have our debug and configuration over on the right side. And as you make changes, you wire up, you take a component, here's an inject node and a debug node, and you wire them together. Pretty simple little user experience. And I might want to, instead of a timestamp, inject hello world and say done and deploy, jump over to my debug panel and clear the text. Now there's hello world. So very simple user experience. Open source project created in 2013 by one of our great colleagues from the IBM Hersley lab, Nick O'Leary. And it's now since joined the OpenJS Foundation, and it's governed under the Linux Foundation open governance. So very powerful. Thousands and thousands of nodes are available in the palette. Let's go take a look. So I needed to extend the palette with all of these nodes, and I'm going to take advantage of the Node-RED Node UI microphone so I can talk to my chatbot. I want to build a dashboard, so I brought in some of the dashboard nodes. That gives me charts and gauges and sliders and text, and I can do UI elements, and so that I can build a dashboard. I also want to take advantage of Watson Assistant and Watson Speech to Text and Text to Speech. So there's a node for all of the Watson AI services. And then I want to play back that audio. So there's a node for Watson Play Audio. I'm sorry, Node-RED Contrib Play Audio. So let's go grab that. I'm going to put that into my buffer. And I'm going to jump to one of my screens here. And you can simply do a npm install of those components, and it's going to go and bring those from the internet, like Avkar showed us. These are not too bad. So I've actually already installed them. You do have to restart Node-RED after that's complete. And so there's Node-RED running. Let's go take a look at what this looks like now. But one of the cool features of our integration with Watson is that we make available the Node-RED Node Watson nodes. And there's a whole variety of them. We're going to take advantage of Watson Assistant and the two speech capabilities. So Watson text to speech and Watson speech to text. And so that becomes part of our flow. Of course, we are going to need to pull in some of the credentials for the communications chatbot. So if you've not yet done that, maybe you already have, you can go and create yourself a Watson Assistant instance, follow the steps that Pooja showed us earlier, and Mofi showed us how to integrate with the data API and the webhook. And then let's jump up to the IBM Cloud. I'll show you how to do that. We'll create some instances of Watson speech to text and text to speech. And matter of fact, I've done that here on another window, and I've grabbed some credentials. Okay. Let's go get rid of that window. So once we have our credentials, we want to import our flow. And so there's some steps to go grab those credentials and grab those API keys. Now we are going to need to grab, and Pooja very earlier showed you where to find the Watson Assistant API key, the URL, and the workspace ID, and then also the skill ID. So we're going to take advantage of those, and we're going to paste them into our flow as well. And then when we're finally finished, we're going to hit the deploy button. and you get back a chatbot, a Node-RED flow that builds a dashboard. Looks like this. It's got some gauges, so we go query the API and we put that in some gauges, and then we can talk to our chatbot by pressing the little microphone input button. We can clear our chat history if we wanted to get rid of the history there, but otherwise it's going to go back and forth, and I can ask it questions through natural voice. And so I've got that running. So I'll tell you the end story, and then we'll come back and we'll show you how to build it. So here we go. So here's our chatbot. I can make that bigger for you all. And let's go clear our chatbot. How many infections? And so there we see that's our, and then of course it's going to go and read that back.
America has 396,221 total confirmed cases of COVID-19.
Very cool. And then of course I can ask it, can I get it from my pet? And since this is a long answer, I'm actually going to turn this off.
You should restrict contact with pets
because we don't really need to hear this whole text read back to us. But essentially it's running in the background.
There have not been reports of pets or...
Okay. So there's our chat bot back and forth with our user. So now you're interested. How do I build this, John? So what I did is I went to follow my instructions here, and I jumped over to import the flow because one of our steps is to grab the flow actually towards the top. I might have skipped over that on purpose. Let's go find that. So I want to import the flow. So that'll jump you over to our Git repository. And if you've not ever done this, so what you want to do is, I always hit the raw button, and there's the flow. I'm going to put that in a buffer. I'm going to hit Control C, and I'm going to jump over to my Node-RED instance, and I'm going to do a file over in the menu here, an import, and I'm going to do a paste. And then I can hit the import button. And then I'm going to get a flow that looks like this, which I did just a little bit earlier. Now I have to bring my API keys in. And so let's go do that as well. But you know what? We're going to do this up in the cloud. So I was just doing it local. I would love to do this in the cloud. So I have my personal account, and I'm going to log in here, and hopefully it knows who I am. It doesn't know who I am. Let's see if it remembers that password. So in this is one of my demo accounts, so I don't really have much running here because I create things and I burn them to the ground. And it's quite okay. But we do have instructions on how to deploy Node-RED to the cloud. And so there's a wiki and a Node-RED tutorial up in Developer that lets you follow some instructions on how to create a Node-RED application, not local, but running in IBM Cloud this time. So let's go do that. I'm going to jump to our catalog and over to software and search on Node-RED. There's a Node-RED app. And I want to give it a name, of course. I want to create one of these. And let's give it a name. Let's call it the Node-RED COVID chatbot. And we want to, before we hit the create button, let's deploy it not in Chennai, but maybe in Washington, D.C. We're going to use everything in the light plan. That's great. And so now we're ready to hit the create button. So it's going to go and use a Cloud Int database for our flow. And it should come back in a moment. So it's now provisioning. Now we're creating credentials for our cloud instance. And while that's working hard, we're going to next hit our deploy button. We do want to increase some of the memory. So do encourage you to make sure you increase the memory of your Node-RED instance in the cloud so we can run the Node-RED dashboard. All right, so that's running. Let's go see the rest of it here. So I grabbed the credentials. Remember, I had the credentials over in another window, and I'm going to go grab them. And I need the API key for our Watson Assistant instance. So I'm going to go paste that here. And I needed to also include the URL. So I've got that over in a buffer. And let's go and bring that in. I've actually pasted it here already, but we can paste that in. Okay. And let's just do it all live here. There we go. And I need the skill ID. So instead of the workspace ID, I need the skill ID. I've got that in my buffer here. I think I was playing with UpCar's instance for a while. I'm going to switch my API keys around. I'm going to use the API keys from my instance. All right, cool. Now I can say done. And I also need to put the API keys in for speech to text. So I want to go and grab those. Remember, I created an instance of that in IBM Cloud. And those are all available in the free tier. There are some caps to it, but for our demo purposes and for a hackathon and for your project in Call for Code, you don't need millions of quota. These are, I think, 1,000 utterances a month, which is plenty. I'm going to go grab my Watson text-to-speech credential, and I need to paste that into my text-to-speech node. Let's go put that in. All right, cool. So let's go hit deploy. And so now I've enabled my keys here. See how the cloud is doing. Hopefully that's finished. Yep, we're ready to hit deploy. And we can go hit the deploy button here. Let's go generate ourselves a key. We can say yes, it's going to go and generate one for us. And we need to bump up our memory implementation here. Let's go give it more than 64. We need at least 256. We can deploy it in Dallas. That looks good. It'll be called the Node-RED COVID chatbot. And let's go hit the create button. All right, so that is now spinning up in IBM Cloud. Let's go back to our Node-RED flow. And since we've already put our credentials in my local instance, let's go narrate how this flow works. And so we start with a microphone node. So I went down in my palette here to our dashboard area. In my dashboard, I have one of the nodes is a microphone node, and it's going to record a couple of seconds of text. When I press the button, it'll pass that WAV file to Watson speech to text. It uploads the WAV file to the IBM Cloud instance that you've created. And it then comes back with a transcript. So I get back a transcript of my voice. How many infections? Can I get it from my dog? What is coronavirus? What do I do if I feel sick? And I take that transcript. Now is when I can call the chat bot. So there's an instance of my Watson Assistant node, and I pass it. What do I do if I feel sick? What are the symptoms? It goes and queries all through its intents, figures out the most appropriate response, and sends me back a set of responses. If the response is how many cases, I'm going to do something a little different than what Mofi did. Mofi called out to the API inside of the webhook. Well, I wanted to demonstrate how to call out to the API right from Node-RED using an HTTP request node. And so remember we used the API COVID-19 API summary. That's what I'm going to call as well. It's sort of redundant, but I think as a demonstration, it was worthwhile to show you how to call out to external resources. So depending on which question, and most of the questions are going to fall through to the otherwise. So I'm going to call the otherwise, and it's going to build a response. Now, what I did inside of this function node, remember Mofi did a nice job of calling out to Watson Discovery. And Watson Discovery returns 3 different articles about COVID-19 in your community. So I just got back a giant blob of text, and I wanted to make that look pretty. So what I did was I converted the URL to actually a hot link so that you could chat, actually launch that URL in my little browser history, chat history. And so a little bit of logic on how to do a regex on that. And then I build a sentence and I pass it over. The build a chatbot table, all the little crazy logic here, all it does is build an HTTP table. And then I pass that to our chat history where I scroll to the bottom. I always make sure that the chat's at the bottom. And so I get a little bit of logic in the UI template node. If it's one of those questions, how many in the US, I call out to the remote API. I get back how many confirmed cases, how many cases in the US. I build a sentence out of that. And I said, the United States has total confirmed cases of COVID-19. And then I'm going to pass that to our text-to-speech node. So over right below here in my palette, I've got all the Watson nodes. And I took advantage of 3 of them in this flow, which is Watson Assistant, is the one here. And then scroll down a little bit more. I'm taking advantage of speech to text and text to speech. And I dragged them out and I wired them together. And after I send that little sentence response to the cloud, I get back a WAV file, and I pass the WAV file to play audio, and you hear the response. So a lot of nice integrations back and forth to my laptop. Let's see how we're doing in IBM Cloud. Looks like it, don't know yet if it's running. Hopefully it will be done soon. We'll get a little green button when we do. Let's see if it's going yet. What was it called? It was called COVID Chatbot. I think I called it mybluemix.net. It's not yet running, but so it's not yet running, but we'll get there. All right. Let's keep narrating our little story. So the last little bit, remember in our Node-RED flow, I wanted to showcase some of the gauges and other capabilities of our Node-RED flow. And so I take the globals, how many total countries, how many confirmed cases, how many fatalities, how many people have recovered, and I put them on nice little gauges here. And so that's the bottom part of this flow. I have a little timer. So once an hour, it recalls the API and so that's a timer. It then does an inject node every day at a specific time, once an hour. Okay. And then I go query the API using this is a HTTP request node. And I pass it I just do a get, and I get back the JSON object, which I parse and I put out on our gauge. So pretty simple. There's no green in this, so it's all red. You could obviously change the colors of your gauges. I didn't consider any part of this a good thing, so it was all red. Now let's go and ask it some more questions. So let's go clear the chat. Did I show you that little node? So here, if I wanted to clear the chat, I just want to delete the history. And so in that case, I just delete all the history and I rebuild the table and I refill the template. So actually a pretty sophisticated little program for, I don't know, 24 nodes here. What does it do? It uses a microphone node. It talks to Watson services. It talks to speech to text assistant, text to speech. It responds back to the user, calls out to a remote API, builds some gauges. And so very simple. And yet here we have a capability. I can ask it, what do I do if I feel sick? And I get back, what do I do if I feel sick? It gives me a whole set of guidance on what to do if I feel sick. And I could also ask it, what are some of the latest news stories? And so here I went up and now it's talking in the background, which I don't want to talk over me, right? But I responded with some of Mofi's Watson Discovery services, and I've made these articles hot links so I can go and, whatever, read about flattening the curve, which is hopefully everyone is sheltering in place and it's gonna subside. All right, so that is our Node-RED flow running local. But remember, we also want to run it in the cloud. Here we go. It's running in the cloud now. So we can hit the next button and call it, let's call it COVID. And we want to give it a password. Let's call it something I can remember. That maybe is good. And so now Node-RED is running in the cloud. And I can go to my flow. Remember, it's blank. Oh, I need to, what was my password? I didn't tell you.
I think it was black dot, black dot, black dot, dot,
Yeah,
dot,
I
dot,
saw
black
that
dot.
too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was
this one.
Yeah, that was the password, I think.
Yeah, there it is. All right, so this is now running in the cloud, but it doesn't have my flow yet, right? So let's go and get rid of this one. And I'm going to jump over to, remember here, Control C, and go over to import. Before I import, I can't import yet because I don't have everything. I need to install a few things. I need Watson. So I need the Node-RED node Watson. That's already installed. That's good. I need microphone. Let's go install the microphone.
So the cloud version of Node-RED, that automatically has the Watson nodes installed, right, John?
That's right. Yeah, did you notice that I didn't have to install that?
Yeah.
It's because our default configuration includes Node-RED node Watson. So let's install the dashboard, however. And the next one I needed was play audio. All right, there are all my Node-RED nodes. I have to spell play audio correctly. Let's go install that one. That's pretty simple. I think there was one more I needed. Let's go back to my instructions. Remember my instructions? I kind of give it to you up top here. Nope, I got them. Those 4. Cool. All right, so now they're all installed. Here they are in my palette, just to prove to you that they weren't in my palette earlier and now they are. So there's the play audio node. And here's Watson, and there's my dashboard with the microphone right there. Cool. Let's do an import. Import, paste. And now I've got my code. There's my flow. Now what I didn't do was paste in my API keys yet. Do we want to do that, or you prove that I can do it? What do you think, Mofi? Should we keep going, or did I cover
I
everything?
trust you, but I mean, if you don't show me, how can I prove that other people should trust you as well?
Oh man. Okay, so I can show you. So there. Let's go do it. Ready? So here's my API key. It's only a little bit of copy and paste at this point. The next thing, what do I need? I need my service endpoint. There we go. And I need my skill ID. John learned how to copy and paste yesterday. And that's done. Now I still need, over in this other one, the speech to text node, I need to paste an API key. So let's go and grab that one. And let's paste that there. That looks good. And there's one more here. So let's go and paste our API key for Watson text to speech. Now you could go to the catalog and create your own instances of this. It takes only a second to do that. Say done. All right, cool. Is this going to work, Movi? Here we go. That's good to go over and launch. Let's go launch our chatbot, our little service here. There it is. It's coming. Oh, we got to make that a little bit bigger. Don't yet have a gauge. So how come the microphone didn't appear? Let's go delete the microphone and grab the microphone. We want to put the microphone in the COVID chatbot record button. That looks good. Let's put it there and say done. And let's go wire it in and say deploy. Let's go take a look. Where'd it go? Oh, it's not rendering for some reason. That's weird. Maybe a bug. But we can cheat here, right? Let's go and inject a string. And what do we want that string to say? We want it to say, what is coronavirus? And we want to tie that right to our Watson assistant here. And let's go say deploy, take a look at our debug and say, cool. Oh, it's going to talk to me too. It's going to be loud. All right. So there it worked, right? Here it is running in the cloud, and I get back some answers.
I don't know the answer to the yet.
Cool.
Very cool.
And so that's now running in IBM Cloud. And so there we go. Those are all of the tutorials. I wanted to thank Pooja. I wanted to thank Mofi. I wanted to thank Upcar for coming and demonstrating the starter kit and how we built it. I think you can obviously take this, add it to your project, extend the chatbot in interesting ways, maybe incorporate your local town government. I'm always curious. The library is closed. Town hall's closed. How do I file a building permit? Where's the nearest testing site? There's lots of different things you can do with our chatbot. Add entities and dialogue to the chatbot. Incorporate other remote data sources, and really make this trusted source part of your application kind of really important. Expose it inside of Slack on a web page in a Node-RED flow. Make it conversational, I think you're going to find that this particular tutorial and open source code is really important for your solutions. Last little plug here. Jump up to our Git repository, fork it, watch it, star it if you want to. Take advantage of the other resources available to us in the call for code. Join us on Friday on April 10th, and you can hear about the second tutorial starter kit, which was remote education, and the final starter kit, which is around community cooperation. So with that, I will end with encouraging you to join the fight and help us make the coronavirus subside. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign out here. Really appreciate everyone's support.